Chapter 403. Xiao Xian wrote down all the cloud patterns he could decipher on an animal skin scroll and the ones he couldn't decipher on another scroll. Then, he tidied up and slept for 2 days. After resting, Xiao Xian's dizziness from deciphering the cloud patterns was gone. He felt refreshed and heard voices in the backyard. Thinking about the seedlings, he went to the backyard. Taiha's Quan Bai and the other 5 had been living in the Yanjiao tribe. They followed Qi Qi and the rest up the mountain to Xiao Xian's backyard to take care of the seedlings. If they had anything to discuss, they would not do it in the yard. If they spoke, they would lower their voices to avoid disturbing Xiao Xian. When Xiao Xian opened the back door and looked into the backyard, he found a dozen old men and women squatting in his backyard. There were also people standing outside the backyard, craning their necks to look inside. He then looked at the seedlings in the field. Judging by their height, they were already above his knees. They were green and in good condition. When they saw Xiao Xian, Qi Qi, Quan Bai and the rest quickly stood up. "How is it?" Xiao Xian asked. Qi Qi was confused and excited, replying, "There are 62 left. A while ago, the seedlings here had also died." When they saw the wilting seedlings, Qi Qi, Quan Bai and the rest felt helpless. They even wanted to give up. But soon, they found that not all seedlings were wilting. Most of them were still fine. Someone suggested to pull out the wilting seedlings. He felt that the wilting seedlings were infected. If they were left in the field, they would spread the disease to the other seedlings. When they were planting in Taiha, they were reluctant at first. Later, more and more seedlings were like this, so they pulled out the rest. Unfortunately, they were all wiped out in the end. However, after some consideration, Qi Qi did not uproot the seedlings directly. They had tried uprooting the sickly seedlings in their 10 plots of land, but to no avail. It was the same whether they uprooted the seedlings or not. Therefore, he didn't bother about it and continued to stay in the field. Luckily, the other 60-plus stalks were still growing healthily. As the days passed, there were no signs of illness. Qi Qi's worries were gradually put to rest. This made her overjoyed. Xiao Xian looked at the few dead seedlings in the field and didn't pay much attention to them. It was already beyond his expectations that more than 60 of them could survive. Xiao Xian had originally thought that if he couldn't plant it, he would just eat the remaining grains. But now, it seemed that he should wait a little longer. The few people from Taiha were very concerned about Xiao Xian's attitude. They were afraid that Xiao Xian would chase them away, so they were very obedient. Even when Duo Kong made fun of them several times, they didn't argue. Seeing that Xiao Xian didn't chase them away, Quan Bai was slightly relieved. At the same time, he was thinking about why the 1,000 gold seedlings in Xiao Xian's backyard could survive that hurdle. Could it be that the seeds given were different? When he thought about this, Quan Bai denied it. The seeds planted by Qi Qi and the others had all died. Xiao Xian wouldn't use inferior seeds to fool them. Why was that? Xiao Xian didn't know either, but he wasn't that stubborn. When he returned to the house, Xiao Xian thought of something and opened the storage room where he stored the food. The storage room was near the back door and beside it was the kitchen. Sometimes, Xiao Xian would just take food from the storage room and go next door to cook. Xiao Xian remembered that because he was busy with the cloud patterns, he didn't even use a pot, didn't cook soup, didn't roast meat and only ate the dried meat. It was more convenient that way. When he was hungry, he would eat a piece of dried meat and drink some water before continuing to decipher the cloud patterns. Thinking back, Xiao Xian remembered that when he prepared the dried meat, other than the marinated meat, he also kept a fresh beast leg. He planned to roast it. Because he had just returned from a hunt, he brought back a lot of trophies. He didn't have a place to put the leg, so he just threw it on the ground. When he was about to roast the meat in the storage room, he suddenly had an idea. He dropped what he was doing and rushed to decipher the cloud patterns. He was so busy that he didn't go back to the storage room. Logically speaking, the beast leg that wasn't marinated and dried should have rotted in the storage room. However, Xiao Xian didn't smell a strong rotting smell. Xiao Xian opened the door of the storage room and looked inside. There was light coming in from the window, so the situation inside was clear at a glance. Xiao Xian's gaze stopped on the ground. There was a piece of beast skin there. The protruding part was similar to the shape of a bone, but the other parts had sunk in and were stuck to the ground. Other than that, there was something else on the beast skin. Xiao Xian walked closer to take a look. He found that it was something like a plant's root system. It was very thin and slightly white, as if it could be broken with a casual pull. However, it was this thin and weak thing that went up from the ground, penetrated the beast skin, and then from another place, penetrated the beast skin again, and plunged into the ground. That was the beast skin of a fearsome beast. Even a stone knife of slightly inferior quality wouldn't be able to cut it. But now, this beast skin seemed to be sewn to the ground. Xiao Xian pulled slightly, but it didn't budge. He had to use force. However, Xiao Xian didn't intend to tear it apart by force for the time being. He used his black knife to cut open the beast skin. There was almost no flesh under the beast skin, only bones. The beast leg that Xiao Xian had thrown here was about a meter long, but now there was only skin and bone left. Where did the white roots come from? Xiao Xian stood up and looked out the window. On the other side of the window was the backyard. There were only the 1,000-grain gold in the backyard now. Even the weeds were weak. Now, because Chi and the rest were taking care of the weeds, they pulled them out whenever they saw them. But what about before? Before Chi came, there weren't any weeds in the backyard. Xiao Xian gently kicked the white root that had pierced through the animal skin. He went out and carefully looked around the house, but he didn't find any other white roots. Using his special vision, Xiao Xian saw below the ground. The white roots did indeed extend from the backyard where the 1,000-grain gold was planted. However, the roots were too deep and Xiao Xian couldn't see clearly. After thinking about it, Xiao Xian didn't tell Chi and the rest about this. He wasn't sure if that was the root of the 1,000-grain gold, so he didn't throw any more meat on the ground. Another 10 days passed. Something happened to the seedlings in the yard. Chi and Quan Bai were worried. A few of them started to wilt. They were worried. Some even guessed that it was a second hurdle. Quan Bai even went back to Taihe to bring some special fertilizers. There were animal fertilizers and plant fertilizers. These fertilizers helped to alleviate the wilting. The number of sickly plants didn't increase. However, the sickly plants started to die. Quan Bai and the rest couldn't save them no matter how hard they tried. 62 stalks, 7 of them gone in one go. Chi, Quan Bai, and the others were pounding their chests in pity. However, a few days later, the situation changed again. More plants started to wilt. This time, everyone panicked. What should they do? Xiao Xian asked for a piece of fresh meat. He didn't clean it up. He brought it to the storage room and placed it on top of the beast skin that was sewn to the ground. The next day, when Xiao Xian went to take a look, he saw another white root on top of the ground. The white root was stuck into the meat. The change was obvious. It shrunk every day until only a piece of beast skin was left. There was a white root sticking out of it. It was similar to the previous situation. After that, the remaining 52,000-grain gold plants in the backyard didn't show any signs of illness other than the 3 plants that showed signs of withering. This made Chi and Quan Bai heave a sigh of relief. However, they were still confused. Xiao Xian didn't explain to them. Xiao Xian stared at the 2 pieces of beast skin on the ground. After a while, he patted the white root with his knife. 1,000-grain gold. What a picky eater. As the days passed, the long and narrow needle-shaped leaves on the 1,000-grain gold plant gradually increased in number. They grew longer and swayed energetically in the wind. After discovering the white roots in the storage room, Xiao Xian would cut off some meat and place it on the floor of the storage room every time he came back from a hunt. After checking, he confirmed that the roots were from the 1,000-grain gold plants. It was even possible that all 50 plants were connected to one root. The mountain was huge and there was still some distance between each house. Other people would not leave fresh meat on the ground for too long. It was only because Xiao Xian was too busy that he forgot to clean it up. That was why such a situation happened. As soon as Xiao Xian stopped supplying the meat, there would be problems in the backyard, and the people who took care of that piece of land panicked again. After that, Xiao Xian told Qi about his discovery. He brought her to the storage room to see the leftovers and the white roots. Maybe there are other fertilizers that can support its growth. But for now, this is the only way. Xiao Xian pointed at the beast skin on the floor. Qi was shocked. While Xiao Xian was still thinking about how wasteful it was, she was already excited. It's good that you know the reason. As for the meat required for this method, it wasn't a big deal. It wasn't winter now. They could bring back a lot of food every time they hunted. She could eat less, but she couldn't save on the 1,000-grain gold. There were less than 40 plants left in the field. Qi didn't want to see any more plants wither and die. Meat? Here. 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 When Quan Bai and the others found out, they were even more enthusiastic than the Yanjiao people. If the Yanjiao people couldn't afford it, the Taihe people would do it for them. Xiao Xian didn't agree to let Quan Bai and the others bring meat. He could handle it himself. However, Xiao Xian also thought that he wouldn't plant it again after this time. This thing was too picky. Chapter 404. After the 1,000 gold grain seeds were fed with fearsome beast meat, they seemed to dislike the meat. 2 more plants died in the field. Seeing this, Qi and the rest threw a few pieces of fearsome beast meat on the ground. If Xiao Xian wasn't an elder, Qi and Quan Bai would have teamed up to criticize him. They thought that Xiao Xian didn't care about the 1,000 gold grain seeds. In fact, Xiao Xian didn't care much about it. Plus, he had been busy deciphering the cloud patterns, so he didn't pay much attention to the seeds. Xiao Xian had eaten the 1,000 gold grain seeds before and felt the benefits it brought. However, he didn't think the benefits were that amazing. There were at least 3 plants in the Taihe tribe that could compare to it. Plus, the way they planted it was much simpler and the harvest was better. If the 1,000 gold grain seeds they produced were like what Xiao Xian had eaten before, it wasn't worth it. The tribe didn't rely on farming for a living. Every time they went out to hunt, they could get medicinal plants and fruits. Why would they put in so much effort to plant these 1,000 gold grain seeds? Plus, hunting fearsome beasts was very dangerous. No one in the tribe would be willing to risk their lives just to get a few seedlings. As for Qi and Quan Bai, they had never tried it before. Who knew if they would still be as passionate after experiencing such hardships and tasting the 1,000 grain gold? One day, Xiao Xian rubbed his tired eyes and walked out of the house. He walked into the yard and saw the 1,000 gold grain seeds that he hadn't seen for a few days. Suddenly, he stopped stretching. He wasn't sure if it was because of the competition, but even with the supply of fearsome beast meat and fertilizers, 1 or 2 plants would die every once in a while. Now, there were only 34 plants left. Each plant was almost as tall as Xiao Xian's shoulder. He didn't know when they would be able to plant. What surprised Xiao Xian were the leaves of the 1,000 gold grain seeds. They were wider and longer than Xiao Xian remembered. Each plant was thicker than the ones he saw at the top of the mountain surrounded by rats. He held a needle-like leaf between his fingers and felt it. It felt different. Was it because the conditions were better? Was that why they were stronger? If that was the case, would the grains they produced have stronger medicinal properties? Would they be more beneficial? Xiao Xian checked the other 30 plants. Every plant that was still alive had bigger leaves than the ones Xiao Xian saw. According to Qi, they were still growing and would grow taller. He didn't know what they would become by then. If the harvest was better than the effort, he could continue experimenting with the seeds he had left. If the losses outweighed the gains, Xiao Xian would keep some and feed the rest to the tribesmen. Who knew how long those grains would be effective? He didn't ask Ji-ju. Here, even the experienced Taiha people couldn't tell him. Xiao Xian flicked the needle-like leaves and said softly, "Let's see if you can give me a satisfactory result." It had been almost half a year since the beginning of winter last year. Their progress was significant. They had finally touched the door. They were slightly better than the ancestors of the Taiha tribe. After all, they had absorbed their results and thoughts. However, there was still a certain degree of difficulty in opening the door. Xiao Xian was stumped. It was as if he saw the door and desperately wanted to open it to see what was behind it. However, there was a lock on the door and Xiao Xian didn't know how to open it. "It's so hard." Xiao Xian sighed. He went out and walked around the tribe. After talking to Duo Kong and Guang Yi, Xiao Xian understood that the shamaness and chief had sent a team to the coast where Xiao Xian came from. When Xiao Xian brought his people there, he left a group to guard the coast. Every once in a while, the shamaness and chief would send another group to exchange with them. Then, they would continue to observe the coast. They only wondered if there would be a day when there would be a change on the coast that would make them happy. After walking around, Xiao Xian saw Chi and Quan Bai taking care of the 1,000-grain gold plants in the yard. They came twice a day. Sometimes, when the weather changed, they came more often. They even stayed on the mountain. Because of the 1,000-grain gold, the relationship between the Taiha people and the Yanjiao people had improved. The Taiha people even revealed some of their secret techniques. If the 1,000-grain gold plants could bear fruit that satisfied them, they would have to show their sincerity if they wanted more grains. When Xiao Xian stepped into the backyard, he heard Quan Bai holding a scroll and talking to the Yanjiao people. "Back then, our tribe's ancestors found the dry water green here." Quan Bai's voice was filled with pride and satisfaction. The dry water green was a type of medicinal herb. It grew in a special environment. It liked drought when it was young. It wouldn't germinate when it was wet. Instead, its seeds would rot. Once it grew to a certain stage in the arid land, due to the rainfall in the mountains, if a spring appeared in the growing area, the drought water green would continue its second stage of growth in the water surrounded by the spring until it bloomed and bore fruit. Because the seedlings, flowers and fruits were all green, the Taiha people named it the dry water green. It was a good medicine for internal and external injuries. The tribe often traded the dry water green from the Taiha people. The warriors would bring some with them when they went hunting. It was said that most of the herbs planted by the Taiha tribe were found by the ancestors of the Taiha tribe many years ago. Then, after many generations of searching, they found the most suitable way to plant them. As for where the Taiha people found the herbs, it was always kept a secret. It was an important source of income for the Taiha people. They wouldn't tell anyone. It was only because of the 1,000-grain gold incident that they talked about it a little. However, some of the important parts were vague and did not go into detail. Xiao Xian was curious. He leaned over to look at the scroll in Quan Bai's hand. It was a map. More accurately, it was a simplified map. Before showing it to the Yanjiao people, Quan Bai personally simplified the original map and blurred out some details. It was like drawing a tree without leaves, only the trunk and branches. But when Xiao Xian saw the lines on the scroll, his eyes twitched. This map looked familiar. After thinking for a while, Xiao Xian's pupils dilated. "What are those curved lines?" Xiao Xian asked. Quan Bai was so engrossed in his explanation that he didn't notice Xiao Xian behind him. He was shocked by Xiao Xian's sudden question. He dared to show off in front of others but not in front of Xiao Xian. After all, the 1,000-grain gold belonged to Xiao Xian. He had a favor to ask of him. Hearing Xiao Xian's words, Quan Bai adjusted his expression and put on a smile. "Those are rivers. The thick ones represent big rivers, the thin ones represent small rivers. Here, this is the river in your hunting area." Because in Yanjiao's hunting area, the rivers weren't drawn in detail. Quan Bai said that it was drawn 1,000 years ago before the Yanjiao people came here. As for this small river, they didn't draw it. Xiao Xian knew about the river that Quan Bai was talking about. When he was looking for the glowing stones, he heard about it from others. The river that they dug for the glowing stones should have been filled with water by now. It was just that it wasn't marked on Quan Bai's map. Xiao Xian's attention wasn't on the small river branches. What he cared about was the thickest river and the few important branches that extended from it. The main river was curved and only part of it was drawn on the map. The two ends weren't completely drawn. It was said that one end was the sea and the other was the center of the continent. But just the lines of the river were already of great help to Xiao Xian. He had already solved one of the problems he faced while deciphering the cloud patterns. Quan Bai was worried that Xiao Xian would ask about some secret things and was thinking about how to reject him. But when he heard that Xiao Xian only asked about the rivers and some unimportant geographical information, he heaved a sigh of relief. He didn't ask about the place where their ancestors found the herbs. After getting the information he wanted, Xiao Xian patted Quan Bai's shoulder happily. "Thank you." Then, Xiao Xian rushed back into the house. Quan Bai was confused by Xiao Xian's reaction. He looked at the others and asked Chi-Chi, "What's wrong with your young elder?" "Who knows?" Chi-Chi didn't know what Xiao Xian was thinking about, but she didn't ask. Even if she knew, she wouldn't tell the Taiha people. There were interactions between the two tribes, but if it wasn't approved by the shaman and chief, they wouldn't talk about it. The matter that the elder was thinking about should be quite important, so he couldn't tell anyone about it. On the other side, Xiao Xian rushed back into the house and closed the door. He moved a stack of leaves to the left of the table. These leaves had cloud patterns drawn on them, but he couldn't decipher them. He couldn't even guess. But when he saw the lines on the map in Quan Bai's hand, he realized that the cloud patterns he couldn't decipher weren't words, they were lines. Lines that represented geographical locations. When he reached a bottleneck in deciphering the cloud patterns, Xiao Xian stared at the cloud patterns on the cauldron. Even if he closed his eyes, he might not be able to draw the lines perfectly, but he wasn't far off. Xiao Xian had memorized the patterns. When he was immersed in his thoughts for too long, he would automatically think about the cloud patterns when he looked at the map in Quan Bai's hand. That was why he could think of the things he couldn't decipher when he looked at the map in Quan Bai's hand. He unfolded the stack of leaves and arranged them according to the pattern on the cauldron. Then, Xiao Xian took out a tree branch and tried to draw on the sand table. He removed the exaggerated or hidden lines and left the important ones. The cloud patterns on the cauldron were actually a combination of words and drawings. Chapter 405. After 2 sleepless days of deciphering, Xiao Xian drew the final result on an animal skin scroll. Although he did not understand the cloud patterns on the cauldron, Xiao Xian already knew a lot from what he had pieced together. The cloud patterns around the cauldron were like a guide. Most of the Xia people's cauldrons, no, not just cauldrons, but other objects would have such cloud patterns. Just as Zheng Luo said, these cloud patterns were different from the decorative cloud patterns other craftsmen made when they were casting bronze. These patterns had inherent secrets and were almost publicly displayed to the world, but few people knew about them. These cloud patterns were complicated, but every successful Xia person had to master them. It was like an anti-counterfeiting symbol. Back then, the ancestors of the Taiha tribe could not replicate it even if they wanted to. Not only that, after deciphering the cloud patterns, Xiao Xian felt that they contained an even greater secret. Perhaps it was a secret about the Xia people or something more important. What were the Xia people good at? Forging. It was said that they were also good at making precision objects. The cauldrons they made were almost perfect circles. As for why there was a cauldron that failed to be forged, Xiao Xian did not know for now. However, from what he heard from others, the Xia people were indeed very capable. Did the secret about the Xia people also involve forging? In the information he deciphered from the cloud patterns, it mentioned a place. Xia descendants had to go there before they were considered true Xia people and worthy of the surname Gongjia. Otherwise, they were failures of the Xia people. Xiao Xian did not know how many years ago the Xia ancestors set this cloud pattern, but this cloud pattern had existed for at least 1,000 years. It had existed even before the Yanjiao people arrived. Forging. This was indeed something that Xiao Xian was very interested. If he could master it, he would be able to master half of the Xia people's skills. His tribe's bronze wares would take a huge step forward. In this aspect, the Yanjiao people were indeed far behind. This tribe was still alright. The tribe on the other side of the sea probably still did not have their own metal weapons. However, there was a core seed there. If they went back one day, everyone would be able to use the skill. As for the flat cauldron in the house, the cloud patterns on the 3 legs represented 3 words, Gongjia Mountain. The pattern left behind by the Xia people was ultimately referring to Gongjia Mountain. From the name, could it be the Xia headquarters? Or was it their ancestral land before the Xia tribe split up? No matter what, Xiao Xian planned to follow the pattern and look around. If he could find the place and learn something from the Xia people, Xiao Xian's time would not have been wasted. Xiao Xian went to the shamaness and the chief to discuss this. The chief wanted to send someone to follow Xiao Xian, but there were only a handful of people who had the ability to follow Xiao Xian. Following Xiao Xian was not a burden. If they randomly sent someone, it would only affect Xiao Xian's movements. That was why only Guang Yi and Duo Kong were qualified. In the end, Xiao Xian decided to go alone. He did not know how long he would be gone this time. The tribe still had a few trades with other tribes, so he needed Duo Kong and Guang Yi to lead them. Xiao Xian himself had to stay in the tribe to hold the fort. Plus, the place he was going to was not familiar to the tribesmen, so the others could not lead the way. Since I can find this place alone, I can go anywhere else. Don't worry, Xiao Xian said to the shamaness and the chief. However, the shaman and the chief were still quite worried, and they took out some forged weapons and medicines. Xiao Xian did not reject their kindness. He took a sword from Jing Luo and some medicine from the shamaness. The shamaness had taught Xiao Xian how to recognize these medicines, so he knew how to use them. It doesn't matter if we can't find Gongjia Mountain. Forging skills are not as important as staying alive. The shamaness reminded Xiao Xian to come back if he could not handle it. Jing Luo had the same thought. Although the cloud patterns Xiao Xian mentioned might have something to do with the Xia ancestral land and forging skills, he was more concerned about Xiao Xian. After all, Xiao Xian was the only person from the other tribe who came here safely. He was also an elder acknowledged by the ancestors. If anything happened to him, would the ancestors still protect them? Jing Luo still wanted to bring the tribe back to Yanjiao's ancestral land when he was still alive. I know. Xiao Xian nodded. You know nothing. The shamaness and chief cursed silently. They had no choice. If Xiao Xian was as mature as Guang Yi, they would not have to worry. However, Xiao Xian was too young. They were worried about a young man's temperament. The 1,000-grain gold's illness had been solved. Chi and the rest could take care of it. Xiao Xian did not have to worry. Hence, on a sunny day, Xiao Xian set off to find the Xia's secret. The first place he went was the river where he dug the water sun stones. After winter, when the snow melted, other than melting snow, there was also more rain. The river had risen. There were more crocodiles in the river. Every time the hunting party went hunting, they would go around this area. These crocodiles were very aggressive. They did not care who was on the riverbank. All humans, wild animals, fearsome beasts were their prey. In terms of size, the crocodiles here were bigger than the ones Xiao Xian saw in the drumming tribe. There were also differences in their shapes. These crocodiles had longer snouts than the ones in the drumming tribe. Their upper jaw was longer than the lower jaw and they had more teeth. The drumming tribe's crocodiles had around 60 to 70 teeth. The crocodiles here definitely had more than 100 teeth. Their thick, nail-like teeth and their distribution in the crocodiles' mouths showed that these crocodiles were very good at catching prey. Their huge, sharp teeth could easily clamp down on their prey and drag them into the water to tear them apart. Their powerful biting ability and well-developed muscles allowed these seemingly clumsy fellows to move with exceptional agility. The crocodiles of the drumming tribe, because they lived with humans, were more or less tainted with human emotions. Even if it was only towards the people of the drumming tribe, it was still there. However, the crocodiles here wanted to kill everything. This was Xiao Xian's first impression of them. The sun was just right. Many of the crocodiles were lying on the shore, basking in the sun. Some of them were rolling around in the mud, some were biting each other, or perhaps they were fighting. From time to time, there would be some hissing sounds. When he was in the drumming tribe, Xiao Xian knew that these creatures that only knew how to bite and kill were actually very smart and cunning. They didn't have big brains, but their intelligence was far beyond people's imagination. When Xiao Xian lived in the drumming tribe, he once saw a child from the drumming tribe teasing a crocodile in the pond next to his house. Xiao Xian remembered that the child stood on the ground next to the pond. He didn't immediately throw the meat over. Instead, he first patted the crocodile's nose. This was like an agreement between them. After patting, the crocodile would open its mouth and wait for the child to throw the meat into its mouth before closing its mouth again. The second time, the child took out another piece of meat from the basket. However, the crocodile in the pond retreated a little. The child wanted to pat its nose, but he couldn't. So he walked a few steps towards the pond and finished the game of patting the crocodile's nose. The third time, the crocodile retreated a little further into the pond. The child continued to move forward. Both of his feet were already in the water. When the child threw the meat into the crocodile's mouth, the crocodile swallowed the food. Then it quickly bit the child's clothes and dragged him into the water. The child, who was standing there with the basket, was instantly dragged into the water. Xiao Xian, who was standing not far away, broke out in a cold sweat when he saw this scene. However, the people next to him told him that it was the tribe's Baoyu playing with the children. They were just teasing the children. Sure enough, when Xiao Xian looked over again, the rolling crocodile only bit the child's clothes. It didn't really bite him. The child was laughing and playing with the crocodile in the water. The meat in the basket had all fallen into the water and was divided by the crocodile in the pond. It was just a game. However, the game of the beasts was closely related to hunting. At that time, Xiao Xian knew that the crocodiles knew how to strategy and how to lure their targets. On land, the crocodiles might be slightly inferior, but in the water, even the drumming tribe's people who were good at swimming were no match for the crocodiles. If the child was standing on the ground, his reaction might have been faster. However, he was lured into the pond by the crocodile and his movements were limited. He didn't even have time to move before he was dragged in. The people of the drumming tribe were used to it. In their eyes, it was just a game. However, in the eyes of others, the crocodiles were extremely dangerous demons. If the child was a member of another tribe, he wouldn't have been bitten by the crocodile. Instead, he would have been bitten by the crocodile's arm, leg or other body parts. After being dragged into the water, the possibility of him coming back to shore was very small. The crocodile's swaying dance and death roll were not a joke. The people outside the drumming tribe saw the crocodiles as killing machines. Xiao Xian wouldn't provoke these killing machines, so he stayed far away. He didn't even get close to the river bank. He just followed the river to find the right direction. Based on the patterns he deciphered, Xiao Xian followed the river until he found the bigger one. Then, he continued to follow the bigger one. The bigger river that didn't dry all year round was just an inconspicuous and easily overlooked tributary on the map. From Quan Bai and the rest, Xiao Xian knew that there were crocodiles in these rivers and they had been around for a long time. Before the Taiha ancestors looked for herbs, crocodiles lived in the rivers deep within the forest, especially the thickest main river on the map. Quan Bai said that their ancestors had records of crocodiles. They said that there were extremely large, strange fish and fearsome beasts there. They were not to be trifled with, so they had to run for their lives. Xiao Xian didn't know how big the crocodiles in the records were, but they were definitely bigger than the crocodiles in these tributaries. Most creatures would stop growing after they reached a certain stage of development, such as humans. However, some creatures didn't. They were in the category of unlimited growth, such as trees and the crocodiles that lived in the rivers deep in the forest. Chapter 406. It took Xiao Xian over 20 days to go from the small tributary in the hunting area to the wider river and then to the main river on the map. Xiao Xian had been hurrying along for the past 20 days without resting. He didn't expect it to take so long just to find the main river. No wonder the people of the Taiha tribe said that when their ancestors went out to search for medicinal plants, they would be gone for a year. If they were looking for seasonal plants that bloomed and bore fruit, the herb gatherers would wait even longer because they might miss the opportunity and have to wait for the next year. Xiao Xian didn't need to wait. He just needed to find the place. Xiao Xian climbed up a tree and stood on a branch. He took out his animal skin scroll and looked at the map he'd drawn, trying to guess his current location. There was no GPS, so he could only guess based on the places he'd passed and the general environment. The trees around him weren't tall and the ground was wet. There were many potholes and ponds and many aquatic plants. This was a swamp area. To find the main river as quickly as possible, Xiao Xian had passed through the dangerous swamp area instead of the safer mountainous area. Although the forest was dangerous too, it was still better than the swamp area. Now, the trees weren't too dense. The bottom of the trees shimmered. Xiao Xian had to pay attention to his surroundings as he looked at the map. This should be the place. It's not bad. Xiao Xian looked at a large river not far away, calculating how long it would take to find Gongjia Mountain. He only knew some vague geographical information. He couldn't find the details. If things didn't go well, it would take even longer. As he was thinking, Xiao Xian's eyelids twitched. He didn't even bother to keep the animal skin scroll in his hands. Instead, he leapt up with all his might. Just as Xiao Xian moved, the calm water under the tree split open. A huge, long, narrow mouth full of sharp teeth opened up, biting at where Xiao Xian had been standing. It was a huge crocodile, more than 10 meters long. As for how long it was, Xiao Xian had no time to speculate. Because of the sudden jump, some of the water plants and leaves floating on the water surface were also lifted high into the air. The slightly muddy water droplets scattered to the surroundings along with the waves. Xiao Xian could even smell the muddy water and the smell of aquatic plants, as well as a murderous stench. That pair of cold, emotionless eyes met Xiao Xian's in the air. It opened its mouth to bite, but Xiao Xian retreated first. It only bit the branch that Xiao Xian was standing on. Crack! The crisp snapping sound indicated that the branch, which was as thick as a person, was as easy as biting a biscuit for the crocodile. The place where Xiao Xian had been standing was at least 7 meters above the ground, but the crocodile had easily crossed this height, and even its entire head was higher. The big mouth continued to move upward, and Xiao Xian could see that the crocodile's nasal cavity was slightly larger than that of an ordinary crocodile. The crocodile didn't give up after missing its attack. Instead, it swung its head vigorously in the air, opened its mouth again, and swept towards Xiao Xian for a second bite. Based on the crocodile's hook-like teeth structure at the front of its snout, they were better at catching prey. As long as Xiao Xian was bitten anywhere on his body, even if it was just his trousers or the corner of his clothes, he would be tightly hooked and dragged down. However, Xiao Xian's reaction was too fast. Even though the crocodile had already made a second attempt, Xiao Xian still escaped from its biting range. He was only half a person's length away. However, the crocodile had already begun to descend, and it couldn't make a third bite. Its closed mouth made a banging sound, and its scaly jaws trembled from the action of biting, as if venting its master's unwillingness. In the end, the crocodile fell heavily into the water, splashing up a large amount of turbid water mixed with seaweed. After falling back into the water, the crocodile didn't get up again, but left with the ripples of the water. Xiao Xian landed on another tree, but he didn't stop. Instead, he continued to jump a few times. A 7 to 8 meter branch wasn't safe at all. He had to find a bigger tree to rest on. That would be safer. The water under the tree was deeper than he thought, or the crocodiles wouldn't be able to hide their bodies completely. While Xiao Xian was looking for a taller tree, he encountered another leaping crocodile. As Xiao Xian bounced away, he drew the bronze sword that Zheng Luo had given him in the air. He twisted his waist and swung his arm with the sword, slashing the crocodile's mouth with great force. Clang! The vibrations from the sword showed the toughness of the crocodile's scales. However, Xiao Xian still managed to injure it, and the sword even pried off one of its teeth. If Xiao Xian had been stronger, he might have been able to cut a hole in the crocodile's jaw. Moving through the swamp was like moving through the crocodile's teeth. It was very dangerous, and because of this, the Taihe ancestors marked this swamp as an important place. If the Taihe descendants wanted to pass through this area, they had to be extra careful. The swamp was very wide. After Xiao Xian found a taller tree, he tried to find land. The river banks weren't all swamps. However, Xiao Xian didn't know where there was land. Even the Taihe ancestors left behind didn't mention it on the map. Xiao Xian could only rely on himself to find it. After putting away the map, Xiao Xian continued to jump above the swamp. He couldn't leave in the direction away from the river. Leaving the river bank would indeed allow him to leave the swamp faster, but if he did that, Xiao Xian wouldn't know if he could determine the location of the main branch. After all, the main branch had curved a few times and didn't flow in a straight line. After walking for half a day in the swamp beside the river, the swamp gradually narrowed. Xiao Xian saw a large forest in front of him. It was taller and more lush, and he could even see the mountains. The swamp was coming to an end. Xiao Xian thought to himself. The number of crocodiles in the area had decreased by a lot. Previously, he had seen many crocodiles on the banks of the river and in the swamp. However, the closer he got, the harder it was for Xiao Xian to see a single one. Just like the fierce beasts in the mountains, a large crocodile needed to occupy a large area in order to obtain food for it to survive. There were only a few crocodiles in such a large area. This place wasn't out of the danger zone that the Taihe ancestors had marked out. It should still be the crocodile's territory. There had to be a reason for this abnormality. Xiao Xian became even more vigilant. As he ran towards the forest, Xiao Xian caught a glimpse of something floating on the surface of the river. After jumping up a tall tree, Xiao Xian looked at the river. There was a clump of water grass on the surface of the river. However, upon closer inspection, Xiao Xian felt that something was amiss. The clump of water grass floated up and down on the surface of the river. Bang! The clump of water grass shook and floated up a little. Water splashed out from it. At the same time, Xiao Xian also felt that the sound of the collision was very strange. There was more than one sound just now. It seemed to be the sound of metal colliding. What was that? Xiao Xian stared at the clump of water grass. There seemed to be something inside. A crocodile? A crocodile trapped in the water grass? No, upon closer inspection, the clump of water grass was square, and on both sides of the water grass was wood. Due to the violent tremors, the water grass had loosened a little. The exposed areas on both sides were tree trunks. That wasn't water grass. It was a cage. It was a trap. Xiao Xian was shocked. If it was a trap, it meant that there were human activities in the area. Moreover, they had specially made a trap. Judging from the size, it was probably to catch prey in the water. Some fishermen caught fish by casting nets, some were good at fishing, and some used water traps to catch prey. However, the third type was extremely rare. This was Xiao Xian's first time seeing a crocodile trap. Bang bang! The trapped crocodile struggled again, causing the water grass to loosen even more. This allowed Xiao Xian to see the trap more clearly. It was a metal cage. People from Yanjiao, Taihe and other tribes would not use metal to make traps. Although bronze was becoming more common, they were very frugal with their use of bronze. Even if they wanted to make a trap, they would not use so much to make one. How big were the crocodiles in the river? A cage like this was at least 15 meters long. How much metal did it use? The further away they were from the great six cities, the less bronzeware they used. Xiao Xian had seen people from other tribes on his way here. The tribe he saw recently used horns and bones when they hunted, they rarely used bronzeware. Xiao Xian was very surprised to see such a huge metal cage. At the same time, Xiao Xian wondered if they were close to Gongjia Mountain. Other people did not use bronze, but the craftsmen were different. Plus, someone who could make a crocodile trap like this was definitely not an ordinary tribesman. Xiao Xian wasn't in a hurry to leave. He found a suitable tree and stood on top of it to hide, waiting. Since the trap had caught its prey, the person who said it would be here soon. If the crocodile in the cage continued to struggle, the trap would be damaged even more. Sure enough, not long after, Xiao Xian heard the sound of someone approaching quickly. The sound was not loud, and the person was very good at moving through the forest. Judging from the sound, the person should be very familiar with this area. When he moved, he was very decisive and did not hesitate to stop. He was very confident. The whooshing sound soon reached the riverbank not far away. Xiao Xian looked over and was stunned. He did not see the front, but at first glance, he thought it was a small crocodile moving around. But when he looked again, he realized it was actually a human figure. There were even human hands exposed. It really did look like a crocodile. Even when the drumming tribesmen were in totemic form, they did not look like this person. However, as he continued to observe, Xiao Xian realized it was actually a person wearing crocodile skin. When the drumming tribesmen used their totemic power to transform, their facial features and bones would change. This person only wore crocodile skin. His real appearance was not much different from a normal person. Chapter 407. After the man quickly came to the shore, he flipped through the grass, and then there was a crunching sound. Xiao Xian watched as the man pulled a thick vine. With the crunching sound, the vine was pulled out little by little, and the trap floating on the water quickly moved closer to the shore. The closer the trap was to the shore, the more the trapped crocodile struggled. However, compared to the crocodiles Xiao Xian had encountered before, this one was much weaker. If it was in its peak condition, the trap might not have been able to last so long with such a large crocodile. After the trap was pulled ashore, its full appearance was revealed. It was a square metal cage. In order to keep it afloat on the water, thick tree trunks were tied to both sides of the cage to keep it afloat. The cage and the tree trunks were covered with water plants, probably to cover up the trap. It was unknown whether this cover was for people or crocodiles. Some people thought that fish were stupid and would fall for obvious traps, so there was no need to cover up the traps. However, the crocodiles here were not stupid. Even if there were stupid ones in front of them, they might be able to avoid the obvious traps. Xiao Xian watched as the man pulled the cage ashore. He tore off the water plants tied to the cage, then took out a vine from the grass nearby and tied it to a metal rod. The end of the vine was tied into a circular noose. Then, the man opened the cage near the crocodile's head. The top of the cage was divided into 3 sections, and he had only opened 1/3 of the section near the head. After opening it, he put the metal rod tied to the noose inside, and the noose at the front of the rod was stretched toward the crocodile's mouth. The crocodile in the cage opened its mouth wide, revealing more than 100 teeth in its mouth. It was showing off its power to the man, and it couldn't wait to rush up and bite the man standing above it to death. The size of the noose was very suitable. With the strength and toughness of the vine, the noose could be maintained in a circle with a slight shake. The man neatly put the noose into the crocodile's mouth. If it was an inexperienced person, the noose might have gotten stuck between the crocodile's teeth, but the man succeeded on his first try. The noose directly wrapped around the crocodile's upper jaw. He opened the other 2 doors at the top of the cage. At the same time, the person moved the 4 corners of the cage. Then, the cage turned from a square to a flat open shape. The crocodile closed its mouth. Because of its nature, the first thing it thought of after its upper jaw was trapped was to bite. After closing its mouth, it couldn't bite through the vines. Its teeth weren't like herbivores that could grind the vines in its mouth. On the contrary, because the vines were wrapped around the gap between its teeth, it couldn't bite through them in one go.
Now, it didn't have much strength to struggle free, so it used the crocodile's best skill, death roll. However, the tumbling of death in this situation only made it sink deeper into its predicament. Originally, the vines only wrapped around its upper jaw. Now that it was rolling, its mouth was bound. Without the restriction of the cage, the more it rolled to the side, the tighter its mouth was bound. After tying the crocodile's mouth, the man used other vines to add a few more loops around its mouth to be on the safe side. After that, the man found some large leaves and combined them with the vines to cover the crocodile's eyes. With its eyes covered, the crocodile's struggling movements decreased. Many fish could reduce their nervousness by tying their eyes. Obviously, crocodiles were similar to fish in this regard. The man knew the habits of crocodiles very well. The crocodile, whose mouth was tied and eyes covered, had its hind legs wrapped by the man's vines. Crocodiles were reptiles. When moving on the ground, their main strength came from their hind legs. The crocodiles that Xiao Xian encountered earlier were able to jump so high to bite Xiao Xian, who was standing on a tree. Other than their strong muscles, the crocodiles also had powerful thighs. Therefore, the man tied the crocodile's legs to restrict its movements. After tying its mouth, blindfolding its eyes, and binding its hind legs, the crocodile was lying there motionless. The man stood to the side and watched. Then, he pulled the vines and added a few more loops around the crocodile's mouth, covering almost all of its exposed teeth. Xiao Xian had experience. The crocodile's fangs were like knives when they shook their heads. They could easily hurt people. The man was sweating all over. He lifted the crocodile's hat back, revealing a dark face full of stubble. He put away the flat metal cage and hid it to the side. Then, he pulled the rope that tied the crocodile. The man suddenly turned and looked in Xiao Xian's direction. "You've been watching for so long. It's time to come out, right?" the man said. There was no anger in his voice. His tone was very calm, as if he didn't care at all. Xiao Xian didn't think that he would be discovered, so he didn't bother hiding anymore. He jumped down from the tree and walked over. He also put his sword in a conspicuous place. If he hid his weapon, it would make the other party feel threatened and hostile. The other party's attitude was kind, and he didn't have any bad intentions. Xiao Xian didn't want to offend him. The man's gaze swept across Xiao Xian, then paused when he saw Xiao Xian's sword. His eyes flashed with undisguised disdain. "Which tribe are you from?" asked the man. "The Yanjiao tribe." After guessing his identity, Xiao Xian didn't hide it. After all, he had more questions to ask. Besides, this man didn't look like someone who was easily fooled. The Yanjiao tribe? The man thought for a moment. "I think I've heard of it."
Is it nearby? Yeah, it's quite far. If it's so far away, why did you come to such a dangerous place? Are you here for training? Asked the man. No. Looking for herbs? No. You're not here for Gongjia Mountain too, are you? Asked the man. Xiao Xian looked at him in surprise. He knew. Really? You? And you're here for Gongjia Mountain? The man looked at Xiao Xian as if to say, "You've overestimated yourself." He was looking for death. Are there a lot of people here for Gongjia Mountain? Xiao Xian was curious. Not many, but there are still a few people. However, as they searched, they ended up courting death. That person said in a flat tone. There was no sarcasm, no gloating. Then I'm Gongjia Hang. He didn't have to say much. One name was enough to reveal the most important information. When he announced his name, Heng was full of pride. The Xia people never hid their surname. They were proud of their surname, Gongjia, and their tribe. He really was a Xia. When Xiao Xian heard this, he was about to ask when the man continued, even I, a Xia, couldn't find Gongjia Mountain. How did you foreigners find it? You're looking for death. No wonder Gongjia Heng was so calm towards the people who came to look for Gongjia Mountain. He didn't look down on them. Even a proper Xia person like him couldn't find Gongjia Mountain. Are there a lot of people looking for Gongjia Mountain? Asked Xiao Xian. Not a lot, but it's not a small number either. I've been here for 20 years and I've met 17 people looking for Gongjia Mountain. 10 of them were Xia people like me and 7 of them were outsiders. In the end, 9 of them died. 5 returned with injuries while the other 3 continued searching. I don't know where they died. Maybe they found Gongjia Mountain, said Xiao Xian. Impossible. If I can't find it, how can they? Said Gongjia Heng confidently. If other people came, it meant that Xiao Xian wasn't the only one who solved the cloud pattern. However, not many people succeeded, so not many people came. However, finding Gongjia Mountain was more difficult than Xiao Xian expected. If even the Xia people couldn't find it, then the chances of others were even slimmer. After all, the Xia people knew more about the cloud pattern and had more information. Because no one could find it, Gongjia Heng didn't care if Xiao Xian came. He waved at Xiao Xian. Come help me. I'll share some meat with you later. In the past, when Gongjia Heng caught a crocodile, he wouldn't kill it here. He still had stock, so he didn't plan to kill it yet. He would keep it for a few days and wait for his stock to run out before killing a new one. That was why he would drag the crocodile back to where he lived after catching it. The Xia people were good at casting and forging. Those who could cast were strong too. It was not good to have weak arms when forging. That was why, compared to most people, the Xia people were stronger. In the past, Gongjia Heng would drag the crocodile back himself after catching it. In the past, he could use some tools like wheels. Now that he had used up a lot of materials, he had to drag it himself. It was too difficult to pull it himself, so he called Xiao Xian over to help. Here, you pull the tail, I'll pull the rope. Before he could finish, Xiao Xian picked up the tail and dragged the 10-meter-long crocodile forward. He walked so easily that he cut off Gongjia Heng's sentence. Your strength is not bad. Gongjia Heng pulled the rope for a while but realized he didn't have a chance to use his strength, so he let go. He stared at the crocodile to see if it was still tired and to prevent it from breaking its vines to attack people. Gongjia Heng had a large hammer in his hand. If anything happened, he would smash it. Is this crocodile drugged? Asked Xiao Xian. Crocodile? You mean it? Of course it's drugged or it wouldn't be so quiet, said Gongjia Heng. The bait he placed in the cage contained a drug that made the crocodile weak. The drug was very strong and could last for half a day. If the crocodile didn't eat it, he would continue to feed it the drug. Right, asked Xiao Xian, how did you know I was hiding there? He thought he was good at hiding and didn't make a sound. I felt someone watching, said Gongjia Heng. Xiao Xian thought back. It made sense. He was too focused on the crocodile. Gongjia Heng had lived here for 20 years, so he was very sensitive. Of course he noticed. Chapter 408. Gongjia Heng lived in a mountain not too far from the river bank. They could see the mountain from the river bank since there weren't many mountains around. Xiao Xian asked a few probing questions along the way and Gongjia Heng answered them all. Unless it was about the Xia people's secrets, Gongjia Heng did not care about anything else. He talked about the weapons he had forged the most, including large cauldrons and ceremonial weapons like swords and spears. His words were filled with confidence and pride. In the eyes of the Xia people, if they claimed to be second in forging, no one would dare claim to be first. The only ones who could surpass them were from their own tribe. Even when Gongjia Heng was praising himself, he did not let his guard down. Although his expression and words were casual, he was able to react at the slightest movement. A strange worm with many legs suddenly leapt out of the bushes. Even though it was lying on the ground, it was still taller than Xiao Xian and Gong Jiaheng. Two antennae-like antennae waved on the top of its head, its two large, pants-like fangs lunged at Xiao Xian and Gong Jiaheng. Even the half-decayed giant tree trunk could not slow down the worm at all. Xiao Xian did not move. Gong Jiaheng, who had just been showing off to Xiao Xian with a smile on his face, leapt high into the air, the hammer in his hand swinging like the wind. A powerful force was transmitted from his arm to the hammer, creating a terrifying aura as it slammed into the worm's head. A half-meter deep crater appeared on the giant insect's head as it clenched its fangs. The shell covering its head cracked open, and brownish-green liquid splashed out from the crack. Such a tyrannical blow did not kill the giant worm, but before the giant worm could react, the hammer flashed past like a hurricane, bringing with it a feeling of thunder. Bang! Bang! The broken outer shell exploded like fireworks under the barrage of hammer strikes, along with the worm's greenish-brown brain fluid. In the blink of an eye, the many-legged worm that had been charging at them was now lying there motionless. Its head had turned into a pile of mush. After the hammer left the worm's body, it continued to dance in Gong Jiaheng's hand. The 1,000-kilogram hammer was as light as a feather. It felt casual. Some people looked intimidating and strong but were actually weak inside. Gong Jiaheng, on the other hand, had a xia totem with bulging muscles that were filled with strength. He was a blacksmith after all. Gong Jiaheng flung the worm's brain fluid and shell off the hammer, then led Xiao Xian back to his house. Where were we? Oh, right, a slave master named Chao asked me to forge a sword. With a smile on his face, Gong Jiaheng continued his story, as if smashing the worm into mush was just a trivial matter. Xiao Xian easily dragged the 10-meter-long crocodile to Gong Jiaheng's house. There was a cave at the foot of the mountain where some goods were stored. There was food and all sorts of tools, including stone tools, bone tools and metal tools. However, Gong Jiaheng did not live inside. He built a stone house outside the cave. The room inside was not big, 2/3 of the space was used for blacksmithing. On their way here, Xiao Xian realized that there were many traps set around Gong Jiaheng's house. They were used to guard against wild beasts in the forest. If they could not guard against them, they could be used as an early warning. I live here, said Gong Jiaheng, pointing at the cave and stone house. Xiao Xian put down the crocodile and followed Gong Jiaheng to look around. Perhaps it was because very few people came here, so Gong Jiaheng was very friendly. He looked at the food in the cave. It was okay for him to eat normally, but it was not enough to entertain guests. Gong Jiaheng was a man who cared about his reputation. He had bragged so much just now, but now he felt that the conditions here were too shabby. He could only entertain guests with food. That was why he decided to cook the crocodile he hunted today. While Gong Jiaheng was killing the crocodile, Xiao Xian looked at the cave where Gong Jiaheng kept his things. Gong Jiaheng did not hide the things in the cave, allowing Xiao Xian to see. However, the stone house was not open to the public. That was where he blacksmithing. There were some things he could not show to outsiders. Xiao Xian did not mind. The cave was dark and deeper than he had imagined. Xiao Xian lit a torch and walked in. Their eyes swept across the cave. There were all sorts of tools, plants and fruits. From the looks of it, Gong Jiaheng had indeed lived here for a long time. It was about the same as the 20 years he had claimed. After looking around, Xiao Xian walked out of the cave. When I was only 20 years old, I deciphered the meaning of the xia pattern. I came out to look for Gongjia Mountain, said Gong Jiaheng as he dealt with the crocodile. The xia pattern he was referring to was the complicated cloud pattern Xiao Xian had seen on the cauldron. Unfortunately, I searched for 20 years and still couldn't find the place. That's why I just stayed here. Every year, I would go out to look for it. If I couldn't find it, I would come back here temporarily to rest and look again. Gong Jiaheng told Xiao Xian about his many years of hardship. At the same time, he wanted to give a piece of advice to the young man, Xiao Xian. Do not do things beyond your capabilities or you will regret it. He had searched for 20 years and still couldn't find it. No wonder Gongjia Heng did not mock the other people who went to look for Gongjia Mountain. He was the same. Fortunately, he was still alive and had not given up. At first, I couldn't get used to it. Many of my tools were made of gold and my food was much more delicate. But after I came here, I could only try my best to get used to it. All these years, Gongjia Heng had learned many jungle survival skills from the tribes living in the forest. He did not have special ropes or copper chains, so he used vines instead. He knew which vines were suitable for hunting and how to make straw ropes. After so many years of searching for Gongjia Mountain, he had used up a lot of the gold he brought back. When he lacked materials, he would help the tribes in the forest forge weapons for low pay in exchange for materials. Sometimes, he would ask them to bring some when they went on a trade trip. He was different from the tribesmen who grew up in the forest. For the first 20 years of his life, Gongjia Heng lived in a city ruled by slave masters. As a Xia, he had excellent blacksmithing talent and lived a good life. Many people tried to flatter him. Even the slave masters would give him special treatment when they wanted weapons. However, after coming here, he could not continue like that. Gongjia Heng's strategy was to be friendly to the tribes in the forest. He needed people to work with him and ask for help. With his identity as a Xia and excellent blacksmithing skills, other than a few tribes who were extremely xenophobic and isolated from the rest of the world, Gongjia Heng met other tribes who treated him with respect. This was why he was so friendly when he met Xiao Xian. As long as they did not have ill intentions, Gongjia Heng would treat them with friendliness. "Is that cage specially made to catch crocodiles?" asked Xiao Xian. "Yes. There are many fish here." Gongjia Heng nodded solemnly. In such a primitive environment, in order to save materials, he could only learn to use materials other than metal. However, as a Xia person, he still leaned towards making metal. He had made other items in the past, but due to certain reasons, he abandoned the other metal items and made that cage. Many people laughed at him for being silly and wasteful. But he did not regret it. "There's a giant fish in that river." "Oh, it's the crocodile you mentioned. It's huge though. I was almost eaten by it a few times when I crossed the river. I don't even know how many weapons I lost in that river." Gongjia Heng grew angry at the mention of this. He looked in the direction of the river with hatred in his eyes. Looks like they had a grudge. Speaking of crocodiles, Gongjia Heng had lived here for 20 years. Even if he had never seen a crocodile in the first 20 years, he had lived in the forest for many years. The river is deep. When they're in the water, they only show their eyes and nostrils. Gongjia Heng told Xiao Xian this so that Xiao Xian could understand the crocodiles better. Their strong tails can propel them to swim quickly underwater. At the same time, they can reduce the waves and sneak up on their prey. Even if they lose a leg in a fight, it's fine because they're born to be strong. Many of them are missing a leg. That's a sign of their fighting style. That's why, Xiao Xian, if you encounter a crocodile that's missing a leg, do not underestimate it or you'll regret it. Gongjia Heng said, "However, when you came here, the crocodile that's missing a leg is inconvenient. In shallow water and on land, they use their legs more. Sometimes in shallow water, they can even jump by stepping on rocks underwater." "Yes, I've experienced this before." Xiao Xian had compared the crocodiles here to the crocodiles in the drumming tribe. The crocodiles here had stronger hind legs. And their teeth. If the drumming tribe's crocodiles' teeth were blunt cones, these crocodiles' teeth were sharp steel nails. Many aspects showed that the crocodiles here were more dangerous. "Wow, I didn't expect this fish to be over 100 years old. It can be used as armor." Gongjia Heng picked up a scale and passed it to Xiao Xian. "When the time comes, you can use its bone plates as armor. These fish can make good armor after they're over 100 years old." "How do you know it's over 100 years old?" asked Xiao Xian. "Look at the top." Gongjia Heng pointed at the scale. "Look at the patterns." The scale Gongjia Heng passed to Xiao Xian had some patterns on it. They were like tree rings, showing the crocodile's age. As for the bone plates, this was another difference between the crocodiles here and the ones in the drumming tribe. The crocodiles here had over 100 bone plates under their skin. It was a type of hard armor that covered the crocodile's back. Xiao Xian could cut the crocodile's mouth with his sword, but he might not be able to cut the crocodile's back. Young crocodiles might be able to cut it, but over 100 years old, it would be difficult. Chapter 409. The Xia people had high standards in many aspects. If they praised something, it must be good stuff. Xiao Xian also believed that the bone plates on the backs of crocodiles that were over 100 years old would make excellent armor. Your armor is also made from the bone plates of a crocodile that's over 100 years old? Asked Xiao Xian. Hang's crocodile armor was assembled. Although it looked like a crocodile, if you looked at it separately, you could see the differences. For example, the protective bone plates on his chest and back were slightly different from the ones on the crocodile he was killing. You could see the patterns on them. Oh, that! Hang was proud. This fish is over 200 years old. Of course it's different. The bone plates of a crocodile that was over 200 years old were much sturdier than a 100-year-old crocodile. This 100-year-old crocodile was so big, yet Hang had called it the shortest of its age. A normal 200-year-old crocodile would definitely be much bigger than this one. Hang was proud of himself for being able to hunt such a huge creature. How old is the big crocodile in the river? Xiao Xian was referring to the giant crocodile that Hang had a grudge against. That one? I don't know. Maybe it's over 1,000 years old, maybe even older. No one can be sure. Hang sighed. The enemy was too strong, he could not fight it. Seeing that Hang didn't want to talk about it, Xiao Xian changed the topic and asked about making armor. Don't hunt another one. Use this one. Although it doesn't look big, it's fine as long as it's over 100 years old. You saw the one in the shallow water. Even if it was bigger than this one, it might not be 100 years old. It's not easy to catch one over 100 years old, said Hang. Alright, I'll give you something in exchange. Xiao Xian reached into his bag. Sigh. It's just some bone plates. I have a lot of them in my collection. You don't have to give me anything in exchange. I'll give them to you. He saw that Xiao Xian was young and his tribe was far away. He didn't look like he had anything good, but he wasn't a threat. Hang had a good impression of him, so he decided to help him. He didn't need these things anyway, so he rejected him. Because it's a long journey, I didn't bring anything. Here, take this. It might be useful, Xiao Xian said, pulling out a water sun stone. He only had 2 water sun stones with him now. He would give one to Hang and exchange it with something else. You don't have many things in your hands, so don't take them. Just, Hang was about to decline when he saw the crystal in Xiao Xian's hand. He paused and asked curiously, what is this? It can emit light. Xiao Xian explained the usage of the crystal. In a relatively closed cave, it was definitely more convenient to use crystals than fire. After all, burning a fire consumed oxygen. In a cave with poor ceiling, burning a fire for a long time would cause people to feel uncomfortable. Plus, it wasn't convenient to start a fire in the forest. It really emits light? Hang tested it according to Xiao Xian's instructions. It really did emit light. Do you have anything else? Hang was more interested in these new things. Xiao Xian shook his head. No. This was the only special item he had that could be used for trading. Alright, I'll take this. Don't take anything else out. Keep some with you, sometimes it can save your life. Hang was already surprised that Xiao Xian could take out a crystal that could emit light. He didn't expect Xiao Xian to take out anything else that could catch his eye. He didn't like the bronze sword Xiao Xian had. On the way here, he had criticized the sword's craftsmanship in front of Xiao Xian. When I remove the bone plates from this fish, I'll tell you how to choose the best bone plates for armor. Hang couldn't stop talking. Armor is very important in the forest. For example, if you're walking in the forest and suddenly meet a beast that's faster than you, you can't escape in time and get bitten. If you're not wearing armor, you'll be bitten to death immediately. But if you're wearing armor, you won't be bitten at all. You won't be bitten at all. Ha ha ha. Xiao Xian, when he saw Xiao Xian's speechless expression, Heng's smile faded. However, he still thought he had told a very funny joke. His eyes were still smiling. Young man, don't be so serious. Smile more. Heng knew he was exaggerating. If you were bitten by a fearsome beast, even if it couldn't bite through you, a fearsome beast with a strong bite could still bite you to death even if you were wearing armor. Armor wasn't invincible. Of course, having armor was always safer than not having armor. Xiao Xian understood this. Before he came to the sea, he had always been wearing bug skin. It had good protection and was light. When Xiao Xian was still a mid-level totemic warrior, Xiao Xian's bug skin had helped him a lot when he fought against a high-level totemic warrior. However, Xiao Xian had used the bug skin to cover the core seed. He had given it to Tua and the rest to bring back to the old haunt. Now, he had to replace it with something else. It was true that the forest was dangerous. Xiao Xian wasn't completely unscathed on his way here. It was just that he had a strong recovery speed, that was why he looked more relaxed than others. As they cooked the meat soup, Heng continued to tell Xiao Xian about his dangerous experiences in the search for Gongjia Mountain. However, after listening to him, Xiao Xian still decided to continue searching. Heng stopped trying to persuade him. Young people just don't listen to advice. It was rare to have someone to eat meat and drink soup with. Heng was in the mood. He talked a lot, but Xiao Xian managed to glean some useful information. I don't know the specifics. I just know we should go that way. I think it's the same direction you've been to before. Of course I know it's the right direction. Heng said urgently. But what happens after we get there? How far can we go? What will happen after we get there? Heng knew he was heading in the right direction, but he had been searching for 20 years and he still could not find Gongjia Mountain. He might have been smiling happily earlier, but when he thought about the fact that he could not find it after 20 years and did not know if he could find it in the future. Damn it, he was anxious. Xiao Xian scratched his nose that was scratched by the flying grass. I don't know either. I'll see when the time comes. This was the truth. Heng was speechless. As the sky darkened, Xiao Xian decided to spend the night here. However, he did not sleep in the cave or the stone house. Instead, he slept in a small house on a tree. This was another resting spot for Heng. If there was any danger on the ground, he would run up the tree. That night, Xiao Xian slept on the wooden bed in the tree house. He closed his eyes and fell asleep. However, in the stone house under the tree, Heng could not sleep. He tossed and turned in bed, unable to fall asleep. He could not sleep, so he got up and went to the forging room. When he was frustrated, he would go to the forging room and hammer at the copper blocks. He did it for no specific purpose, just to vent his frustration. He hammered. Clang! Should he go out with that kid to look for it? He hammered again. Clang! However, he couldn't bear to lose face. Why would the Xia people need help from outside the tribe? Dignity was important. He hammered again. Clang! He had been searching alone for 20 years and still couldn't find him. Perhaps that kid could be of some use. Clang! 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 Annoying! 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 Chapter 410. Heng struck copper the entire night. The next morning, he heard Xiao Xian coming down the tree. When he came out of the stone house, his eyes were bloodshot. It was a terrifying sight. What's wrong? Xiao Xian had also heard the sound at night, but he could still tolerate it when he wanted to rest. People who often hunted in the mountains and forests would hear the roars of beasts, birds, and insects from time to time if they rested in the mountains and forests at night. If they couldn't even tolerate these sounds, then they wouldn't be able to rest. It was rare for the forest to be completely silent. When Heng heard Xiao Xian, he looked up at Xiao Xian with bloodshot eyes. His facial muscles twitched. Nothing. Then, he turned and walked towards the cave. There was some water stored in the cave. Heng used a fruit shell as a ladle and splashed it on his face to wake himself up. He calmed himself down after a night of conflict. "I've thought about it," said Heng in a low voice as he squatted beside a wooden bucket filled with water. He was still holding a fruit shell in his hand, but he didn't scoop any more water out. Xiao Xian turned around to signal that he was listening. Heng continued. Heng didn't even look up. His hand was still scooping water, but his eyes were fixed on the ground as if there was something there that attracted his attention. "Aren't you going to look for Gongjia Mountain?" "I've thought about it and I think I should go with you." Heng looked like he was trying to explain himself but quickly added, "You're so young, this is your first time here. You must not be familiar with this area. I've lived here for 20 years, I've been out searching many times. I can give you some advice." Xiao Xian paused as if he just realized something. He clapped his hands and smiled. "That's great. Wipe that smile off your face. Don't think I don't know what you're thinking. TSK, why do I feel like hitting you?" Heng tossed his ladle aside and picked up his hammer. "Let's eat first. We'll have energy to work after we're full." To search for Gongjia Mountain, they had to prepare some life-saving items. First, medicine, poison, food, tools, and so on. It hadn't been long since Heng left to search for Gongjia Mountain. If Xiao Xian hadn't appeared, he wouldn't have planned to leave so soon. That was why he didn't prepare many tools. However, since the plan had changed, he had to hurry up and get the things he needed. Xiao Xian's armor was made from the bone plates on the back of the crocodile they had eaten yesterday. At first, he wasn't used to wearing it. Just like how the crocodiles were limited by the bone plates on their backs, Xiao Xian put on the armor. Although it had been modified in terms of flexibility, it was still much less comfortable than the insect skin he had worn before. However, in this situation, he couldn't ask for too much. It was already good enough to have something to wear, as long as it had good protection. After making the armor, Heng brought Xiao Xian to gather herbs. "We need more medicine for healing and poison." After they returned, Xiao Xian familiarized himself with the armor while helping Heng set up traps. It would take 3 to 5 days to prepare everything, so he didn't plan to stop here. The cage they used to catch the crocodile was set up again. Heng used a type of beast meat as bait and hid the medicine inside. Then, he hung the bait in the cage. When the crocodile swam into the cage and bit the bait, the cage door would be pulled shut. Unless someone came to open it or the cage was knocked open, it wouldn't open automatically. However, the crocodile would have been drugged and would lose its strength quickly. It wouldn't have the strength to knock the cage open. "Be careful with this drug. Just a little bit." Heng measured it with his thumb and forefinger. It wasn't even the size of a green bean. "It's enough to knock someone out. Of course, powerful people like us can hold on longer. Weaker people can't." A little bit was enough to knock an adult out. The ball of medicine Heng had placed in the bait was the size of a ping-pong ball. After the crocodiles ate it, they struggled. The so-called knockout drug was only a relative term. For some creatures, it was a knockout drug that would only cause them to fall unconscious, but for others, it was a lethal poison. If a person was given the same amount of medicine as the crocodiles, they wouldn't just faint. They might not wake up and die. At the same time, Heng told Xiao Xian not to overdose their prey. If they overdosed, it would affect them when they killed them. They had to control the dosage. Otherwise, if they overdosed on the crocodiles, what would they do if they overdosed? In 3 days, Heng prepared his own tools. He even gave Xiao Xian an axe. If Xiao Xian didn't have anything to use, he would need Heng's help if he ran into trouble. Giving Xiao Xian was also helping himself. In 3 days, no crocodiles took the bait in the cage. They weren't sure if the crocodiles didn't notice the bait or if they didn't come here. "How are we going to cross the river?" asked Xiao Xian. Although this main river was wide, standing on the river bank, one could see the other side of the river in the distance. Compared to the river that isolated the tribe, it was not worth mentioning. "Should we make a boat? Or a raft?" asked Xiao Xian. "Don't think about that. Don't even think about it. You can't walk on the river. Although the river looks calm, the cage on the water hasn't caught a single crocodile in 3 days. That means the big crocodile is active in this area. If you want to make a raft or boat, you have to travel further. You can't use it here, you'll be swallowed along with the boat. That thing is very difficult to deal with and it takes a lot of time," said Heng. He didn't set up the cage just for hunting. It was also an indication. If they caught a crocodile, it meant the big guy wasn't active in the area. However, if they didn't catch a single crocodile for a few days, it meant the other smaller crocodiles were scared away. They didn't dare to fight for food here. Then what should we do? Xiao Xian waited for Heng to tell him his plan. Since Heng often went there, he must have a plan. Heng smiled proudly and took out a wooden whistle. He blew it 3 times a beat. Toot, 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 the whistle was sharp, echoing far and wide through the forest. After a while, Xiao Xian looked up into the sky. A dark brown figure was flying over from afar. It was about 4 meters long. "Look, here's my plan," said Heng proudly as he looked at the approaching bird. It was a bird that looked like a vulture. Most of its body was dark brown with only a few gray patterns. The bird didn't come down immediately. Instead, it perched on a tree and looked at Xiao Xian cautiously. "Come down, hammer. This is Xiao Xian. We'll be crossing the river together," said Heng. He wasn't sure if the bird understood him. It looked at Xiao Xian, then at Heng. It cawed but didn't come down. Heng dragged out the remains of a ferocious beast to lure the birds down from the tree. "You didn't come down when I told you to. Now you come down when there's food? Coward!" Gongjia Heng even kicked the bird when it landed. He controlled his strength well so he didn't hurt it or send it flying. "Caw!" The bird cawed, ignoring Heng as it began to peck at the food. "Bring us over when you're full, you hear me? Or I'll kill you with my hammer." Heng threatened with his hammer but the bird didn't even look at him. It was as if all it saw was food. However, if you looked closely, you would notice that it tilted its head slightly in Heng's direction when he spoke. It was listening. When he saw the bird ignore him, Heng huffed and smashed his hammer on the ground. He sat down to rest. He told Xiao Xian about the bird. "That year, I caught it in a trap. I put a copper chain around its neck and planned to pluck its hair and kill it for dinner. But that day, there was a tremor in the forest. Many stones rolled down from the mountain. The rolling stones were not the main thing. The main thing was that there were all kinds of frightened beasts in the forest. It was a mess. Those traps were useless in such a situation. I was almost hit by a beast. I was just trying my luck. When I saw a struggling bird, I untied the chain and climbed onto its back. At first, it wanted to throw me off but after I pinched its neck a few times, it calmed down. After the chaos on the ground ended, I forced it to land. I thought that if it didn't listen to me, I would just use force and beat it to death. After all, there was a forest below and with it as a cushion, I wouldn't fall to my death. Who would have thought that this fellow would be so cooperative? After the crisis was over and I came back from hunting, if it was around, I would throw some meat to it. Gradually, it got better. Sometimes, when it was hungry and couldn't find food or it couldn't beat the other birds in the flock, it would come to me for food. Now that I think about it, it's been more than 10 years. Heng reminisced, then turned to Xiao Xian proudly. "What do you think? Mine's not bad, right? Although it doesn't listen to me, it helped a lot. Without it, it would be more difficult to cross the river. We would have to meet the crocodiles and maybe even the big one in the river. Actually, I used to have one too. It was bigger than yours and more obedient, recalled Xiao Xian. Then where is it now? Asked Tang. He thought Xiao Xian was bluffing. He didn't believe him. We haven't seen it in a year, sighed Xiao Xian. Pfft, Heng snickered. The one you're talking about probably ran away with the other birds. That can't be. It's always been alone, said Xiao Xian. Giant mountain eagles were not social animals. Unless they were in a group, they would usually be alone and would often fight with each other. However, what on earth was Cha-Cha doing now? Chapter 411. While Xiao Xian was thinking about Cha-Cha's whereabouts, on the other side of the sea, in the old land of Yanjiao, the shaman was also thinking about the same thing. After Xiao Xian disappeared in the desert, Cha-Cha brought Tua and the others back and left immediately. It was said that he appeared in the desert and last appeared in the Hui tribe. After that, he never returned to the ferocious beasts' mountain forest. The shaman sent people out to look for him, but they couldn't find him. He originally planned to send people to the Hui tribe in the grassland to ask, but he didn't expect that before the people he sent out to leave the ferocious beasts' mountain forest, people from the Hui tribe in the grassland came to find him. They said that Cha-Cha went to their tribe for a walk and then left with a few eagles. No matter if it was the eagles that had a conflict with Cha-Cha or the 2 eagles that went to the desert with him, they all left together. They were still wondering if Cha-Cha had taken all of them to the Yanjiao tribe, but they didn't find anything. Cha-Cha didn't have a mark, so it was different from the other ferocious beasts in the tribe. Except for Xiao Xian, it didn't listen to anyone, not even old Ke. Now no one knew where it was and where it took the air force of the Hui tribe. At the same time, a team of 7 eagles was flying up a mountain. They flew through the clouds and over the frost. When they were tired, they used their claws to hold on to the mountain wall. After a short rest, they shook off the ice on their wings and continued to fly up. The smallest eagle at the back was a little tired and was getting further and further away from the team. In the end, it could only rest on the mountain wall again. It was listless and cried out weakly. It looked like it didn't want to fly up anymore. The eagles in front of the team also stopped on the mountain wall and cried out, but no one flew down to help. One eagle wanted to, but it was stopped by the biggest eagle in the team and almost got hit by its claws. Since they couldn't help, they could only encourage it. The eagle above cried out to encourage its companion and signaled for the eagle that was lagging behind to fly up quickly. Cha-Cha was also watching from the side, but it did not give any encouragement. After waiting for a while and seeing that the eagle below was still not moving, it retracted its claws and grabbed a snow-covered stone from the mountain wall. Then, just when the other eagles thought that Cha-Cha would help, it threw the stone down. The other eagles, the stone hit the head of the eagle below. The originally listless eagle was stunned. The snow on the stone flew into its eyes. Because the stone was not big and was mostly covered with snow, it was not injured. It only felt a little pain. After throwing the stone, Cha-Cha grabbed another stone and threw it. This time, the eagle dodged it. After being smashed again and again, the eagle below was enraged. The feathers on its neck were a little puffed up, and the ice on its feathers fell with a whoosh. Screech! The eagle below let out an angry cry and flapped its wings to chase after Cha-Cha. After throwing another stone, Cha-Cha took off and continued to fly upwards. Seeing this, the other eagles quickly followed. After a long time, the 7 eagles had all flown to the top of the mountain and stepped onto the ice field. They lay on the ground weakly and did not have the strength to fight. The few smaller eagles were too lazy to even cry out. After a short rest, Cha-Cha got up and walked forward slowly. It was starving and wanted to eat ice. This was the second time it came to this place. The last time, it was that unknown eagle that brought it and Xiao Xian here. Thinking of Xiao Xian, Cha-Cha bit off a piece of ice from the icicle and threw it on the ground to step on it. Fuck, Xiao Xian disappeared again. The fog on the top of the mountain was very thick, but they could still see some huge black figures around. In this team, the two largest eagles were standing on the ground. They were both more than 10 meters tall, and one of them was more than 15 meters tall. However, in this ice field, they were considered children. No matter how arrogant the 7 eagles were outside, they did not dare to act recklessly here. Even if the other eagles were old, they could still kill them with one swipe of their claws. If they could fly here safely, it meant they had the strength to live. That was why they did not offend them and did not want to get themselves killed. The giant mountain eagles had to go through a trip to Eagle Mountain to grow. Every time they came here, it was like a snake shedding its skin. There were 2 eagles in the team who came here for the first time. They followed the 2 largest eagles out of the 7 with curiosity. Cha-Cha did not go over. It chose an icicle and rested there, thinking, when I leave this place again, I'll scare Xiao Xian to death. On the other side, Xiao Xian looked at the unwilling bird and turned to ask Heng, Hammer really won't throw me into the river? No, of course not. Heng promised, then glared at the bird called Hammer. Did you hear that? Do your job well and I'll give you a reward. Or I'll roast you today. Hammer bird let out a slow caw. See that? It agreed. Don't worry, it won't throw you into the river. Heng patted Xiao Xian's shoulder. Young man, be brave. Trust me more. All right, trust me more, said Xiao Xian. The things they had to bring were heavy. The weapons, especially Heng's big bronze hammer, would make the eagle protest for a long time. For safety's sake, they had to come in batches. In the past, Heng would come in 2 batches. Hammer would bring Heng over first, then fly back to bring the other things. Heng's plan was for Hammer to bring Xiao Xian over first, then come back to bring the other things. Finally, Heng would be brought over. We have to keep an eye on our things or the monkeys in the forest will steal them all. Xiao Xian, you go over first. Heng had told Xiao Xian before that there were many annoying monkeys on the other side of the river who had stolen Heng's things. All right. Xiao Xian brought his own things. His things weren't as heavy as Heng's so they could be done in one trip. Hammer jumped on its back and flew to the other side of the river. As he flew higher, Xiao Xian was able to see the area better, and he could see the situation within a large area. It was better to have air support. Xiao Xian didn't know that Cha-Cha had escaped with one of the Hui tribe's air forces. The people of the Hui tribe were frantically looking for them. Xiao Xian saw an island on the surface of the river. It wasn't actually an island but the corner of a giant beast's head. Its bulging eyes were open, staring coldly at the sky. Xiao Xian felt that Hammer bird, who was carrying him on its back, had shrunk its body a few times. Then, it flapped its wings vigorously and flew higher and faster. It wanted to avoid this area as much as possible. Even if it was in the air, it was still very afraid of the creatures in the water. In the river, the area above the surface of the water expanded, revealing a long and narrow beak and 2 large nostrils. These were all signs of who this big guy was. This was the giant beast that had caused all the other crocodiles to disappear. This was the king of the river, a giant crocodile of unknown age. Gongjia Heng told Xiao Xian that there was a time when he was riding a bird over the river. When he was about to reach the other side, he looked down from the sky and suddenly felt uneasy. He thought about the rumors and told the hammer bird to fly higher and faster. At the time, Hammer couldn't fly very high because it was carrying a lot of things and it was too heavy. It took a lot of effort to fly high. When he felt something was wrong, Heng's mind raced. In the end, he made up his mind and threw a bag. It contained a few weapons he had painstakingly crafted. Although it was painful, it lessened the burden. The giant beast below suddenly rushed out, half of its body above the surface of the river. Its mouth was like a giant clamp, filled with death and blood, waiting to trap its prey. Hammer flew higher and faster, barely escaping from the beast's mouth. If he still carried the heavy items, he and Hammer would have been in the crocodile's mouth a long time ago. The bag Heng threw down was swallowed by the giant beast. The weapons he had painstakingly crafted were excreted somewhere at the bottom of the river. they couldn't be recovered. That was the beginning of the grudge between Heng and the giant beast. No wonder Heng would rather take a few trips than carry too many items at once. If he carried too many items, he wouldn't be able to react in time. This was a lesson he had learnt.
Chapter 412. Xiao Xian returned to help Gongjia Heng. That way, they could leave this place as soon as possible. The monkeys in this area were not friendly. Although they were not big, they were hard to deal with. According to Gongjia Heng, these monkeys liked to eat human brains. He had found a few human corpses in this forest with their skulls cut open. Anyone who could find this place was no weakling. That was why they could not fight these monkeys head-on. They would be at a disadvantage. Leaving as soon as possible was the best option. Since they were traveling together, they had to help each other. Initially, Gongjia Heng thought that Xiao Xian, a young man who came here for the first time, would encounter many difficulties. He thought that if he helped, he would be able to save some face and teach this kid a lesson. He did not expect the situation to be reversed. Because of this, when the two of them ran away from the area occupied by the monkeys, Gongjia Heng's expression froze. He did not know what to say. When he thought of his excuse, he blushed and thanked Gongjia Heng dryly. In the forest behind them, there were still the unreconciled screams of the monkeys and the sound of beating branches. They seemed to be very angry. They actually couldn't stop a single intruder and were left far behind by the two of them. They didn't even touch the human skin. After leaving the monkeys' territory, the two of them hurried on. Xiao Xian did not need to look for them again. Gongjia Heng led the way. He had been here many times, so he was familiar with this place. There were some small rivers around, similar to the ones in Yanjiao's hunting grounds. During the dry season, they would see the riverbed. They did not know which branch this river came from, but it extended all the way here. There were some smaller crocodiles and other aquatic animals living here. It was not the dry season yet, so they could hear the sounds of animals in and around the river. An anaconda was leisurely moving in the bushes by the river. It was lazy and did not care about the other animals around it because it was already full. When Xiao Xian passed by it, he saw that there was a bulge on the anaconda's body. Judging from the shape, the anaconda had probably just swallowed a crocodile. In the beginning, Heng had told Xiao Xian what to watch out for. That was why Xiao Xian didn't need any reminders. He safely avoided the hidden predators. Xiao Xian was doing too well. He did not look like a first-time visitor at all. Because of this, Heng could not find another chance to teach Xiao Xian. This made Heng realize that his excuse of tagging along was unnecessary. He was frustrated. He could only sigh. The tribesmen who lived in the forest were indeed very suitable for moving around in the forest. 2 days after the departure. At this speed, we'll reach the resting place before dark, said Heng. Because he came here often, there were a few resting places along the way.
One time when he was looking for Gongjia Mountain, he found a cave on one of the mountains. It was a suitable resting place. At the time, there were many snakes and insects in the cave. He even used medicinal powder to get rid of them. After that, every time he left, he would smoke the cave with medicinal powder to prevent it from becoming a nest of snakes and insects. Before the sun set, they reached the mountain Heng mentioned. The mountain was steep and there were all sorts of wet moss on the walls. It was slippery, but it was not a problem for Xiao Xian and Heng. It's here. Heng looked at the large rock blocking the entrance. There were traces of green powder next to it. This was the medicine he had applied the last time he went back. It was still there, so there should not be any insects or snakes in the cave. There was no need to waste medicine to get rid of them. Take this, I'll move the rock. Gongjia Heng passed his bag to Xiao Xian, then moved his shoulders. With both hands on the rock, he pushed hard to the other side. This rock was heavier than the crocodile he hunted. It was difficult to push it. Suddenly, Heng felt the resistance lighten. The rock moved quickly to the other side. Hey, didn't I ask you to hold the things? You push. Hung wanted to tell Xiao Xian to just hold the things. Why push the rock? Because of the limited materials, he treasured the weapons in his bag. If he lost them, it would be difficult to find them again. Unfortunately, there were many creatures flying in the sky and jumping in the forest. They loved to steal things, so he could not push the rock. However, when Hung turned his head, he realized that Xiao Xian was holding their belongings in one hand. He did not put them down, his other hand was pushing against the rock. You did a good job. These were the only words Hung managed to squeeze out. He thought to himself, so what if you're strong? However, as a fellow traveler, with Xiao Xian's help, Gongjia Hung felt much more relaxed this time. In the past, it would take at least 3 days to get here. Now, it only took 2 days. Hung had to admit that Xiao Xian was quite capable. They lit a fire and went out to hunt a small fearsome beast before the sky turned dark. They cooked it outside and brought it back to the cave. When I first came here, I wanted to build a house. Then I realized that a cave is more convenient, said Hung as he barbecued the meat. Our tribe lives in caves when we hunt. Xiao Xian told him about his hunting days. In the past, Hung did not understand the life of a hunter in the forest, but after 20 years, he was no longer curious. He did not ask. It was cold at night and the wind was strong. The cave was not deep, so the fire danced in the wind. Xiao Xian walked to the cave entrance and moved the rock slightly. He left a small gap to prevent the wind from blowing in and affecting the fire. When he saw Xiao Xian move the rock so easily, Hung felt jealous. You Yanjia people are all so strong. Yes, our tribe has a lot of manpower. It's suitable for forging. Speaking of which, I think I've heard of your tribe before. It's been too long, so I don't remember. In the past, Hung had focused on forging, so he only heard about it from others. He did not know much about it and was not interested in it. Later on, when he was searching for Gongjia Mountain, his information was even more limited. After a full meal, Gongjia Hung extinguished the fire and was about to rest when he saw Xiao Xian take out a glowing crystal, an animal skin scroll and a weird-looking pen. He used the light to write and draw on the scroll. What are you writing? Asked Hung. I'm adding a map, said Xiao Xian. Why are you drawing a map? How many times do you plan to come here? I don't know. We'll be lucky if we can make it back alive. Don't think too much. As a real Xia person, I've been searching for 20 years and you think you can find it in one go? But it's okay if you can't find it. It'll be a learning experience, said Hung comfortingly. Actually, he was looking forward to finding it on his first try too. However, he had been attacked time and time again. Hung was prepared to fight for a long time. He would not give up. If it weren't for the fact that he couldn't trade with other tribes to get materials, he would have stayed in this area. However, he was still curious about Xiao Xian's map, so he leaned over to take a look. He had seen the map Xiao Xian drew after deciphering the cloud patterns. At that time, it was just a few simple strokes. Now, it was a lot more detailed. The places they passed, the monkey forest, the pond, the shrubs and even the high mountains were marked. Why is this empty? Hung pointed at a spot on the scroll. I've never been there. I've been there. Let me tell you. Hung pointed at the empty spot on the map and started talking. He had been there when he was searching for Gongjia Mountain. Although it had been a few years, he still had a vague impression of it. Then, he said, when we get back, lend me a copy of your map. Hung liked Xiao Xian's simple yet effective markings on the map. He wanted a copy too. Sure. Since Hung agreed so readily, Xiao Xian did not feel awkward. I'll draw a copy for you when the time comes. Hung was satisfied when he heard Xiao Xian's reply. At this moment, he felt exhausted and sleepy. Sleep early. If you don't, you'll suffer. After 2 days of rushing, he was exhausted both physically and mentally. It was as if he had been smithing metal for more than 10 days. Just one night's rest was already rushed and this kid was still staying up late. Xiao Xian continued writing. When Heng saw this, he did not say anything else. He would make the kid regret it later. However, when Heng woke up the next day, he realized that Xiao Xian was even more energetic than he was. He even went hunting early in the morning and brought food back for breakfast. Heng was about to say something when Xiao Xian asked in surprise, "Master Gongjia, why are there two suns outside?" When they arrived yesterday, although it was close to sunset, there was indeed only one sun. Xiao Xian had only seen one before, but this morning, when he went hunting, there were two suns in the sky. Where did the other one come from? After Xiao Xian's question, Heng no longer cared why Xiao Xian was so resilient. He smiled mysteriously. "It's only two suns and you're already scared? What will you do if there are more suns in the sky?" Xiao Xian was silent for a moment, then probed, "An illusion." Heng was even more surprised. If other people heard that there were more suns in the future, they would definitely ask for the reason. He did not expect Xiao Xian to be so direct. "You can say that." Heng walked out of the cave and looked up at the two suns in the sky. He sighed. If Gongjia Mountain was so easy to find, there wouldn't be so many people buried here. Whether it was the people in the forest or the slave masters in the cities, they all used the sun's movement to determine their location and time. But what if the sun's movement changed? Right now, the two suns in the sky did not affect their journey. However, the further they went, the more illusions they would encounter. It would be harder to determine their location and their decisions would be seriously affected. Although the two suns were not far away from each other, people who were not familiar with this place would have a hard time determining their location. "Do you know which sun is the real one?" Gongjia Heng's eyes gleamed with pride when he asked this. However, when he thought about Xiao Xian's divination skills, he was excited. "Why don't you do a divination?" Heng went to look for a straw rope. Xiao Xian closed his eyes and opened them again. He looked at the sky and pointed at the sun on the left. "That's the real one." Gongjia Heng was about to hand Xiao Xian a straw rope excitedly. He wanted to observe Xiao Xian's divination skills and test Xiao Xian's proficiency. However, when he heard this, his hand paused and he dropped the straw rope. "How did you know?" asked Heng. "I guessed." Chapter 413. "Did you already know?" asked Heng. If not, how could Xiao Xian tell in such a short time? He did not believe that Xiao Xian was guessing blindly. "Yes, I knew," said Xiao Xian. Gongjia Heng relaxed. So that was it. Where did this kid get the answer from? Did someone tell him before he came? Just as he thought about it, Xiao Xian said, "I got the answer when I was hunting this morning. I just confirmed it again." "You mean you knew when you went out this morning?" "Yes." "How did you know?" "I saw it. I can tell which is fake." Xiao Xian did not tell her about his other vision. In his other vision, there were only physical objects, no illusions. Of course, he could tell which sun was real. He was just surprised this morning that he could see the sun in the sky. Heng did not expect Xiao Xian to have this ability other than divination. Heng knew the answer because of some secret tools and his past experience. It was Xiao Xian's first time here. However, if Xiao Xian could see through this environment, it would be a good thing for them to find Gongjia Mountain. As for how Xiao Xian saw through the illusion, Heng did not ask. Everyone had secrets, just like how he hid many things from Xiao Xian himself. Some things could not be told to outsiders, especially when it involved different tribes. After eating the game Xiao Xian brought back, Heng rested for half a day before calling Xiao Xian to set off. It was already noon. One of the two suns in the sky had disappeared. The illusion was gone. Here, the two suns only appear in the morning. They return to normal at noon. That's why, if you encounter a problem that you can't solve immediately, you should wait. maybe the problem will solve itself. Hung spoke like an elder, teaching Xiao Xian. Xiao Xian listened carefully. Although Hung liked to show off sometimes, he was a Xia craftsman after all. He was a good person, so Xiao Xian listened carefully. As time went on, Xiao Xian understood why Gongjia Hung said, 2 heavenly suns is nothing to be surprised about. Xiao Xian encountered more illusions later on. It wasn't always the sun, sometimes it was mountains, sometimes it was an ordinary forest. In a forest like this, if you took the wrong path, the further you went, the more mistakes you'd make. The further they went, the fewer fearsome beasts they saw. Even normal beasts were rare. If they hadn't prepared jerky beforehand, they would have gone hungry. However, if it was just these illusions, it wouldn't be a big problem. He just had to change his vision. The real problem was the real thing. Under the influence of many factors, it would interfere with one's mental state and affect one's judgment. For example, Xiao Xian and Hung had walked in a forest for 2 days, but in the end, they had returned to their original path. Both of them were not bad at directions. They knew how to judge the direction, but in the end, they were back where they were 2 days ago. This was troublesome. Gongjia Heng's experience was only useful for the first part of the journey. He couldn't be sure about the later parts of the journey. If he could decipher this easily, he wouldn't have been unable to find Gongjia Mountain after 20 years. He knew it was here, but he couldn't find it no matter how hard he tried. I'm stuck here. I can't go any further, said Hung, wiping the sweat from his forehead in frustration. The forest looked normal. There were no dangerous fearsome beasts. It even looked peaceful, but Hung had to stop here. It took me 15 years to get here, but that's it. I've been walking in this forest for 5 years. Hung sighed, calming himself down. Now, he was no longer as anxious and depressed as he was when he was trapped. His voice was calm. Xiao Xian stood where he was 2 days ago, looking away from the forest. He took out a straw rope and said, "Let me try again." 2 days ago, when Hung brought Xiao Xian here, he had asked Xiao Xian to do some divination to see which direction they should go. However, Xiao Xian had tried 3 times and failed. The rope broke before he could even make a knot. It's okay if you can't read it. Hung looked at Xiao Xian's persistence and thought that Xiao Xian must be upset. But if it was so easy to get out, why would he be stuck here for 5 years? He had a strong feeling that as soon as he got out of this forest, he would arrive soon. However, it was like a thick door, blocking him from his goal. However, although Hung said it was okay if he couldn't read it, he was upset too. The more he thought about it, the more frustrated he became. His emotions that had just calmed down were stirred up again. He shifted his gaze to Xiao Xian, wondering when Xiao Xian's knot would break. However, after a few breaths, 1 knot was done. After a while, another knot was formed, then the third. Gongjia Hung was like a statue, frozen in place. His eyes almost popped out of their sockets as he stared at the rope in Xiao Xian's hand, his facial muscles twitching. The 3rd knot was done, the 4th knot, the 5th knot. He watched as Xiao Xian's rope formed 1 knot after another, then another, forming even more complicated knots. Just a little bit more, just a little bit more. Please don't break, please don't break. Hung was screaming in his heart, but he clenched his teeth, not daring to make a sound. He was afraid that he would disturb Xiao Xian. He had searched for 20 years, been stuck here for 5 years and had not made any progress. Now, the rope that he thought was hopeless was slowly forming knots. One could only imagine how Hung felt. Hung prayed in his heart, "Oh, straw rope, please don't break, please don't break. I'll just make every strand carefully, every knot will be carefully tied." Hung regretted not suggesting Xiao Xian to use a stronger material when he was making the rope for the divination. What if the straw rope was accidentally broken at a critical moment? Hung did not move, but he was sweating. Large beads of sweat rolled down his forehead, but he did not wipe them away. He was still staring at Xiao Xian's rope. Thud, there was a soft thud. It was the sound of Xiao Xian's fingers sliding across the rope after he finished the divination. At the same time, it meant that the entire process was over. Xiao Xian let out a long sigh of relief. He had used up a lot of energy this time, as if he had been hunting for days in the forest. He was exhausted and his mind was still numb. After a while, he snapped back to reality and realized that Heng was still leaning against the tree. His face was red and sweating profusely, his eyelids twitching. "Master Gongjia, what's wrong?" Xiao Xian asked in surprise. Heng's flushed face trembled violently. Then, in a strange voice, as if he was trying to suppress something, he asked, "The divination is out?" "Yeah, it's out." He could only get the result if he walked the path himself. If he only listened to Heng's explanation, he would not be able to get the result. As soon as Xiao Xian finished speaking, Heng, who was leaning against a tree, leapt up from the ground. He jumped so high that he didn't even care if his head broke a tree branch. Then, he took deep breaths and swung his fists up and down as if he was swinging a hammer. This Grandmaster seemed to be a little abnormal. Xiao Xian thought. When Gongjia Heng finally returned to normal, he ran to Xiao Xian and asked excitedly, "Which way?" "Follow me." Xiao Xian changed his field of vision and focused. He blocked out all external disturbances, as if he had locked himself in another world. Then, he lifted his feet and walked over according to the instructions on the knot. Heng did not say anything when he saw Xiao Xian like this. No matter how curious he was, for the sake of finding Gongjia Mountain as soon as possible, he had to hold it in. He could not interfere with Xiao Xian's judgment. The two of them did not speak. Their footsteps were light. Only the rustling of leaves could be heard in the forest. Half a day later, they finally stepped out of the forest. There were no tall and dense trees blocking their view. They could see the mountain in the distance. Before sunset, they reached a valley. They could only rest here tonight. There were no caves, so they found a place to rest. This was not Gongjia Mountain, but Heng had a feeling. "We're almost there. I can feel Gongjia Mountain calling me." Heng looked in a direction, his expression solemn. The closer they were, the more cautious they had to be. They could not fall before dawn. This seemingly ordinary valley might not be as easy to traverse as the forest from before. Xiao Xian leaned against the mountain wall to rest. He had used up a lot of energy today. He did not rest after reading the divination. When he walked out of the forest, every nerve in his brain was in a state of high tension. He only relaxed now. In his mind, on top of the totem flame, threads of energy extended out, following his blood, along with his muscles and bones, circulating in his body over and over again. Every time it circulated, the nearly exhausted power in his body would increase, and he would quickly recover. Xiao Xian's pale face gradually faded. His face was rosy again, but it was not obvious at night. Heng could not tell, but if he knew, he would be shocked at Xiao Xian's recovery ability. Xiao Xian originally thought that such a situation would not happen in the depths of the forest, but he did not expect to encounter it here. The night was very quiet. Other than the occasional sound of sand rolling in the wind, there was no other sound. When the wind stopped, he could not hear anything else. The gusts of wind when he walked out of the forest during the day were like an illusion. The next day, when Xiao Xian woke up, he was no longer tired. The sun had just risen, so it was not bright. In the U-shaped valley, the thick mountain walls on both sides were about 100 to 200 meters high. If you stood on the mountain, you would realize that the further you walked, the higher the walls became. That was why Xiao Xian could not see the details of the valley. He could not see where it led to. Chapter 4:14. Even in the daytime, there were still gusts of fierce wind. When it blew through the valley, it made a whistling sound. "This used to be a river," said Gongjia Heng. "This river was called Xia River, but it dried up and turned into a valley. That was why it was called Xia Valley. Xia Valley is a sad place. It was fine when it was a river, but when the river dried up and turned into a valley, it changed drastically. I heard that people never came out after entering Xia Valley. Gongjia Heng had heard stories from his elders. Now that he saw it with his own eyes, it was different. It's Xia Valley after all. Xiao Xian, do you smell something special? Asked Heng. Stone. It's the smell of death. Gongjia Heng sighed meaningfully, then walked forward. Gongjia Mountain was in Xia Valley, but even so, there was an indescribable pressure as they walked through the valley. There were no animals, only bare rocks on both sides. There was barely any vegetation. Previously in the forest, although there were no wild beasts, at least there were lush plants. But here, it was like a dead land with few people. Did the Xia people used to live here? Gongjia Heng said a long time ago, this place used to be a river, so it must have been a good place to live. He just didn't know how it became like this. We'll leave after noon, said Gongjia Heng. Why? Asked Xiao Xian. We'll only find the door to Gongjia Mountain after noon. Since Heng said so, Xiao Xian agreed. The Xia people knew more than he did. It was better than moving forward blindly. The two of them left after noon. The further they walked, the more familiar Xiao Xian felt. He thought back and remembered something. Xiao Xian had to admit that Heng was right. There was the smell of death here, but at the same time, it was an opportunity for some people. Xiao Xian could feel the presence of the core seed. It wasn't here, it was quite far away. However, Xiao Xian could feel the death aura of the core seed. Perhaps this barren and desolate valley with almost no other living creatures was caused by the core seed. It was rumored that only the people of the 6 tribes possessed the core seed. Only a small number of the other tribes possessed it. Did the Xia people who had been scattered all over the world also possess the core seed? No matter what, finding Gongjia Mountain might be the answer. Just like the forest in front of them, this place was like an enhanced version of a maze. There were many forks in the road, and as they walked, they were blocked by the mountain walls. Xiao Xian couldn't just climb over them. He could still remember the original path, but if he climbed over, who knew what the road would be like? Heng climbed up the wall, but he didn't jump over it. He decided to walk. He didn't believe he couldn't get out of here. Xiao Xian was unable to perform a successful divination. Just like the forest he had walked through earlier, he did not have enough ability to perform a divination. Therefore, he had to make up for it with other methods. Perhaps he would be able to obtain more information and perform a successful divination. On their third trip to a sealed road, Heng sighed. I've heard the elders of the tribe say that the Xia River is a very special river. Now I've finally seen it for myself. The Xia River was naturally formed, not man-made. That was why it was so special. Now, there was no more water. The Xia River had become the Xia Valley, a natural maze. Looking up, they saw the blue sky. It was so monotonous that they couldn't see any clouds. Around them was a lonely valley filled with the smell of death. Xiao Xian and Heng would leave markings on the mountain walls along the way. After sunset, Heng stopped moving. They would only set off after noon the next day. If we don't find it soon, we'll starve to death, said Heng. When they were in the forest, they would return to their original path. Even if they were hungry, they could temporarily leave to look for food. But here, if they got lost and couldn't return to their original path, it was easy to be trapped in this valley. Even if they jumped up the mountain and felt that they would definitely be able to walk along a line from a high place, they would unconsciously deviate from their direction. This was a very strange feeling. It was even easy to misjudge the direction because the sun in the sky was constantly changing. Sometimes it was 1, sometimes it would suddenly become 2, and sometimes there would be more. Even if there was only one sun, what the eyes saw might not necessarily be correct. In a place like this, it would be difficult to survive if one's mental fortitude was not strong enough. For 3 days, Xiao Xian and Heng walked in the Xia Valley but found nothing. They only had half a day to search every day. According to Heng, they could walk slowly as long as they used the right method. Unfortunately, there was nothing useful. To save energy, they would find a place to rest after searching. Saving energy meant saving food. They only brought a limited amount of dried meat so it wouldn't last long. When they came to a sealed road again, they saw a human skeleton. They didn't know how long this skeleton had been here. It must have belonged to a powerful person, at least a mid-level totemic warrior, or a regular person would have broken it with a light tap. Based on the skeleton's posture, it looked like this person had raised his arms and roared at the sky before he died. Even though the flesh was long gone, Xiao Xian could still see the unwillingness in this person's eyes. There are fewer and fewer Xia people searching for Gongjia Mountain now because most of them have died. Very few succeed, said Hang. This was just the first skeleton. After that, Xiao Xian saw more skeletons. Someone had carved words on the walls, but due to the passage of time, the words could no longer be seen clearly. Their last words could not be read and no one knew who they were. If they were lucky, they could guess from the rusted weapons. If the weapons were so rusted that they couldn't see the inscriptions, then there was nothing they could do. No matter how powerful they wouldn't know who they were when they died. Xiao Xian looked at the rusted weapons on the ground and got up to say to the solemn Hang, "We have to hurry or we'll have to go back. We don't have much food left. If we can't do it this time, I'll come again next time." Although he said that, Hang felt like the target was right in front of him. He just couldn't see it clearly. He didn't want to go back just like that. It was no wonder those who died in that position. Some people were too stubborn and forced themselves to die even when it was beyond their capabilities. Perhaps most of them died of starvation. Hang was not sure. How sad. Can you read it now? Asked Hang. Xiao Xian shook his head. The anticipation in Hang's eyes turned to disappointment, then to self-mockery. The longer he lived, the more backward he became. Didn't the Xia people rely on themselves? How could they place their hopes on others? Especially when the other party was an outsider. Looking at the sky, Hang said, "That's it for today. We'll continue tomorrow." He could use Yang Guang's shadow and the ground's shadow, as well as the rocks on the walls to predict the location. However, it was too slow. He might starve to death before he could use this method to find Gongjia Mountain. Sitting on the ground, Heng carefully took out a piece of jerky and drank some water from the flask. He thought about what to do next. Xiao Xian was thinking too. Among the skeletons he saw today, there were some scattered bones. Xiao Xian guessed that they were probably eaten by others. When people were desperate, they would do something unexpected. Xiao Xian had seen this many times. The people who came to search for Gongjia Mountain all had different personalities. It was understandable that they would do something like this. Xiao Xian did not want to starve to death here, nor did he want to chop Hang up and eat his flesh. If he couldn't find Gongjia Mountain, he would just go back. However, since he was here, he had to try his best. For some reason, his readings had not been successful. Xiao Xian had to find another method. Sensing carefully, he was surrounded by the aura of death from the core seed. However, it was not easy to pinpoint the location. Should he use the totemic flame in his mind? That wouldn't work. This used to be Xia territory, it had nothing to do with Yanjiao. The totemic flame could not help him. Xiao Xian was about to calm the totemic power in his body when he realized a sliver of power was gathering at his chest. When he opened his eyes, Xiao Xian saw a spark. He took out the elder's bone ornaments. Xiao Xian realized that all 4 bone ornaments were burning. There was no wind, but the flames were all floating in the same direction. Heng had been thinking with his eyes closed. When he sensed movement, he opened his eyes to see a fire in Xiao Xian's hand. The fire was still floating in the same direction. Let's go that way tomorrow. Xiao Xian stuffed the bone ornaments back into his clothes and calmed the totemic power in his body. The flames on the bone ornaments were extinguished. Heng's eyes brightened. He knew Xiao Xian would have a way. He had planned to go back if there was no progress, but now there was hope. The next day, after noon, the two of them set off, following the direction of the fire. At the same time, Heng would do a quick calculation every once in a while to confirm if he was right. When they passed by a spot, Heng suddenly stopped and yelled, "Wait! What's wrong?" asked Xiao Xian. The fire was indeed pointing in this direction. Xiao Xian took out the bone ornaments to try again when Heng took out a copper nail and stuck it into the ground. He looked up at the sky and asked Xiao Xian, "Is the sun in the right direction?" Xiao Xian nodded. After confirming, Heng looked at the shadow of the copper nail on the ground and made a few gestures. Then, he looked at the mountain wall and walked in the direction he guessed. They were not far from the mountain wall, but every step felt like it weighed 1,000 kilograms. It took him more than a minute to walk 10 meters. His throat was dry and his eyes were unfocused. Finally, they reached the mountain wall. Heng looked at the wall, which seemed normal. He pressed his palms against the wall and roared, pushing with all his might. Creak, the stone door slid open. Chapter 4:15. Who would have thought there would be a stone door on the mountain wall? Why was there a stone door here? There was only one answer. They had found the place. Heng was so excited that his hands were shaking. He almost couldn't push the door open. He had to adjust himself before continuing. Xiao Xian did not help. If this was any other time, he would have helped, but this was a stone door that could lead to Gongjia Mountain. It was an honor for the Xia people to do this. So Gongjia Mountain wasn't outside Xia Valley, it was within the valley itself. When the stone door was pushed open, a gust of cold wind blew out. It was dark inside. There was no light at all. Heng did not care about anything else and hurried in. Xiao Xian followed. Once they were inside, Heng closed the stone door again. With the light from the glowing crystal, there was no need to start a fire. There was no firewood either. Heng did not say a word after they entered. He walked along the tunnel in a hurry. After 20 years of searching, he had finally found this place. It was understandable that he was excited. Xiao Xian followed Heng for about 30 minutes. There was a floral scent in the wind. There was light ahead. They had reached the end of the tunnel. They walked out of the tunnel and saw a place completely different from Xia Valley. It looked like an ordinary valley with a small stream. There were many plants on both sides of the stream. Xiao Xian even saw a few types of crops and fruit trees. This was where the Xia people used to live. Not far away, there was a 3-meter-tall bell. Who knew how long it had been there? It was covered in dust and stone, so it was hard to tell what it looked like. Heng hurried over and picked up a hammer beside the bell frame. He hit the bell with it. Clang! A loud and melodious bell rang, echoing throughout the valley. It seemed to have a rhythm and pitch, rising and falling. It announced that another Xia person had successfully arrived. As the bell trembled after being struck, the dust and stone particles on it were shaken off, revealing the true appearance under the dust. It was a bronze bell that was almost golden in color. It was smooth and had no traces of rust. There were inscriptions and pictures on it, the biggest of which read, Gongjia Valley. The valley was still buzzing. Heng, who was standing next to the clock, threw his head back and laughed maniacally. After laughing, he put down the bell hammer and looked at the surrounding mountain walls. The cliffs here were not as steep as the Xia River Valley. There were some vines with bright flowers growing on the cliffs. However, at this moment, neither Heng nor Xiao Xian noticed the fruit on the vine. Instead, they stared at the light patterns on the wall after Yang Guang was reflected off the bell. Under the contrast of these patterns, the valley was dyed with a mysterious color. 20 years, 20 years. I finally found it. They were like 18 5-meter-tall advanced totemic warriors. The pressure they exuded rushed towards Xiao Xian. It felt like a real body was pressing down on him. It felt like there would be wind and swords coming at him mercilessly in the next second. One statue was enough to cause immense pressure. Now, there were 18 of them. Xiao Xian also felt like there were other things hidden in the shadows. To prevent outsiders, the Xia people would not have only made 18 bronze statues. Witchcraft. Xiao Xian felt the power of witchcraft. This was only the first step. If he took another step, the repulsion would be stronger and the murderous intent would be thicker. Xiao Xian had to withstand the pressure alone. It was very difficult. Heng was about to tell Xiao Xian to take his foot back when Xiao Xian's body lit up. Whoosh, flames erupted from Xiao Xian's bone ornaments, almost enveloping Xiao Xian. At the same time, it blocked the pressure from the 18 bronze statues. Perhaps it was because they felt Xiao Xian's resistance, the cloud patterns on the statues became even more obvious. Their aura increased exponentially. If the statues had just come alive, they now looked like they had stepped onto a real battlefield. They were only 5 meters tall, but it felt like they had suddenly grown taller. They were so huge that they could crush a person. The surrounding atmosphere changed instantly, as if the air was about to be frozen into a block. Even Heng, who was standing behind the 18 bronze statues, was affected by the pressure. He looked at Xiao Xian in shock. How could this kid trigger the bronze statues to such an extent? The stronger the outsider was, the more intense the reaction of the Copper Guardian would be. It was obvious that Xiao Xian's step had a huge impact on this place. It was just one step, a normal step. It wasn't even a big step. How could such a simple step cause such a huge impact? Heng felt like he had gone too far. He wanted to slap himself. He shouldn't have let Xiao Xian take this step. This kid was too strange. On Xiao Xian's side, when the 18 bronze figures' auras changed, he also reacted. The flames wrapped around Xiao Xian rose to a height no lower than the 18 bronze figures. At the same time, a blurred figure of a flame appeared. The flame figure reached out with one hand, as if it was trying to block the attack. You're strong, I'm strong too. Once again, the two sides began a new round of competition of aura, a confrontation of power. Aura could kill. At this moment, it felt like two powerful auras were fighting. Even though the aura wasn't directed at Heng, he still felt uncomfortable. He clenched his teeth and held on. He could feel his bones creaking. If this continued, he would vomit blood and collapse before he could even see what his ancestors had left behind. He looked at Xiao Xian. He was facing the 18 statues head-on. Although he looked like he was having a hard time, he was doing much better than Heng. Heng felt like he was suffocating, it was getting harder to breathe. But this wasn't the end. The battle escalated again. Metal clanged from the 18 statues, as if they were warriors fighting on the battlefield. The totemic patterns on Xiao Xian's body glowed brighter. The flame giant grew taller. The aura grew stronger. Heng was drenched in sweat. The veins on his arms pulsed like they were about to explode. He wanted to speak but he couldn't. Even the blood in his body felt like it could only move in this stagnant atmosphere. Who the hell was this kid? Was he just a young Yanjia warrior? Who was he kidding? Even if he was a prodigy, he wouldn't be in this situation. Was it really not some old monster that had come? Heng felt like he couldn't hold on any longer. Also, he seemed to see the statue shaking. It must be a hallucination caused by the clash of forces. Thankfully, the aura around him subsided. Xiao Xian retracted his foot. The frozen air finally started to circulate. Heng looked at Xiao Xian, who was standing at the door. Xiao Xian looked the same as before. Other than breathing a little faster, he didn't look bad. "All right, I've tried," said Xiao Xian. Heng's face twitched. "You've tried? You almost scared me to death. You promise you won't force your way in?" Heng was really worried that Xiao Xian would force his way in. In the past, he could say with absolute certainty, no outsider can enter Gongjia Mountain safely. But now, he was suspicious. Even if Xiao Xian couldn't enter, if he forced his way in, it would shake Gongjia Mountain. No one knew what would happen then. Don't worry, I won't force my way in. Xiao Xian turned to leave. Heng wiped the sweat off his face as he watched Xiao Xian leave. His leg muscles were stiff and he couldn't walk. He had to walk slowly. Chapter 4:16. Heng entered the mountain while Xiao Xian left. Not far from the bell, he sat down on a rock that had been carved into a chair. He was still thinking about what had happened. Heng thought that Xiao Xian had done it on purpose, but in reality, Xiao Xian did not expect this to happen. The flames on the ancestral bone ornament came from its own accord, not from Xiao Xian. It was more like a conditioned reflex caused by external witchcraft. When it sensed a threat from outside, it came out to protect Xiao Xian from the powerful impact. This was probably what the tribesmen meant by the protection of their ancestors. Perhaps the flames on the bone ornament had something to do with the Xia shamans. The bone ornaments reacted that way because there was wizard power in this place. The Xia ancestors must have left behind something related to craftsmanship on Gongjia Mountain. To prevent outsiders from entering, the Xia people had set up all sorts of traps. The first obstacle was the 18 bronze statues left behind by the Xia shaman. However, compared to studying Xia witchcraft, Xiao Xian was more interested in the power of the bone ornament left behind by the Yanjiao ancestors. In the past, he only knew that a flame giant would appear during the ceremony, just like the fire seed in the fire pit. Now, it seemed that the flame giant did not only appear in the fire pit. The power left behind by the ancestors in the bone ornament was much stronger than Xiao Xian had imagined. It was obvious from how it had blocked the 18 bronze statues. Xiao Xian knew that if they were to continue with the contest of sorcery power, the side that would emerge victorious would be their side. However, the result of a head-on battle to the end would definitely not be what everyone wanted. Looking at the shiny ball on the bone ornament, Xiao Xian thought that since the bone ornament had the power left behind by the first shaman, could it borrow this power? Not the power he used to find his way, but the power he used to face the 18 bronze statues when he stepped into Gongjia Mountain. The items left behind by the ancestors could protect and block threats. However, it would not be easy to borrow them. Xiao Xian decided to give it a try. If he succeeded, he would have a powerful force to support him, and he would have more confidence when facing external enemies. He stood up from the stone chair and carefully recalled the changes in his power when he stepped through the bronze door. Xiao Xian activated the power of inheritance. The power of the bone ornaments was not the totemic power often used in hunting or battle. It was another type of power of inheritance. Blue flames separated from the totemic flames. As the blue flames pierced through the totemic flames shone brightly. The power of inheritance flowed through Xiao Xian's body until it reached Xiao Xian's chest. It gathered, like a whirlpool, sucking it all in. As the power of inheritance seeped in, flames appeared on the 4 bone ornaments. However, the flames were different from before. The bottom part of the bone ornaments was a blue flame. Outside the blue flame, there was an orange flame. The closer it was to the bone ornaments, the redder it was. Xiao Xian's surprise was replaced by joy. Although the flames were different from before, this proved that his guess was right. He could activate the bone ornaments and borrow its power. Since his guess was correct, Xiao Xian continued. The power of inheritance flowed faster through his body, gathering at his chest and then transferring to the bone ornaments he was wearing. The power of inheritance also triggered the appearance of totems. Totemic patterns appeared on Xiao Xian's body, but the difference was that in the past, at its peak, the totemic patterns only looked like flowing lava and etched by flames. Now, however, they were real flames. Xiao Xian could even see flames swaying on the totemic patterns. As the power of inheritance increased and gathered, the flames on the bone ornaments burned brighter and brighter, enveloping Xiao Xian completely. Xiao Xian felt the surging power of inheritance, as if it was a hot current, flowing between his muscles and bones. Not enough. This power of inheritance was not enough. It was not enough to form the flame giant. Once again, Xiao Xian increased the flow of the power of inheritance. The blue flames that flowed out of the totemic flames grew thicker. When they gathered together, they surged into the bone ornaments with great momentum. The flame giant was gradually taking shape, but it still did not meet Xiao Xian's requirements. Its aura was too different from when he was in the bronze door. However, Xiao Xian felt powerless now. It seemed that even if he drew out all the blue flames from the totemic flames, he would not be able to activate the power of the bone ornaments. Back when Xiao Xian used the secret engraving technique to engrave Caesar, he did not feel this way. Xiao Xian did not stop. He continued to increase the power of inheritance. He had already reached his limit, and now he was almost there. Moreover, if this continued, the power of inheritance in the totemic flames would be exhausted. It would take a long time to recover. The recovery of the power of inheritance was much more difficult than the power of totems. However, so what if it was exhausted? Xiao Xian still wanted to give it a try. At this time, Xiao Xian realized that the light shield that enveloped the totemic flames was brighter. It was no longer flickering like before, but maintained its brightness. In comparison, even the active totemic flames seemed dim. The blue flames that extended from the totemic flames became thicker again. Moreover, when they passed through the light shield, they seemed to be plated with a layer of white light. The blue flames that were coated in white light rushed into the bone ornaments with the force of a tidal wave. Xiao Xian, who was carrying such a large amount of flames, felt his muscles expand from his neck to his shoulders. His meridians expanded, but his body felt heavier. It was like he was carrying a mountain. Every step was difficult, even moving was difficult. The air around Xiao Xian became viscous, flowing rapidly as if a storm was brewing. Xiao Xian was standing in the eye of the storm. The viscous air brought with it the destructive force of a hurricane. The first thing it hit was the stone chair behind Xiao Xian. Bang! The stone chair, which was not damaged by the wind, shattered into pieces of stone and dust, scattering everywhere. One of the pieces of stone flew straight towards the golden bell that Gong Jiaheng had struck earlier. Clang! The bell rang louder than Gong Jiaheng's, echoing throughout the valley. In the next moment, some cloud patterns with golden light appeared on the mountain walls around the valley. The patterns flashed and the echoes of the bell stopped abruptly. At the same time, Xiao Xian felt a wave of pressure, similar to when he faced the 18 bronze statues. Xiao Xian did not look around. It was difficult for him to even move his neck. This was the most crucial moment. The flame man was not fully formed yet. It was not tall, about the same height as Xiao Xian. However, this was already a difficult feat for Xiao Xian. It took him so much effort to reach this step. If he gave up now, Xiao Xian would not be willing to do so. However, Xiao Xian soon realized that the pressure around him did not make it difficult for him to activate the bone ornaments. Instead, it helped him. Sensing the external threat, the bone ornament's protective energy was activated. However, not much energy surged out. Because of this, Xiao Xian activated the energy and a complete flame man was formed. Xiao Xian tried to walk but he could not. His feet felt like they were weighed down by something heavy. Even the slightest movement was difficult. Xiao Xian took a few deep breaths and gathered the remaining energy in his feet. Then, he slowly lifted his feet. Normally, walking was extremely easy, but it was this kind of easy action that was extremely difficult at this moment. Just lifting his feet off the ground was enough to make Xiao Xian sweat profusely. It was as if he had been drenched in water. He raised his foot little by little, took a small step, and then stepped down, just like how he usually walked. However, the process was slowed down countless times. Whether it was raising his foot or stepping down, it was extremely difficult. He had to break through one obstacle after another at every moment. Finally, when his foot landed on the ground, a burst of energy exploded from where his foot landed. Bang! A thunderous boom rang out. Stone chips flew everywhere, and powder radiated outwards, splashing everywhere. With Xiao Xian's feet as the center, it formed a circle with a diameter of more than 10 meters. Moreover, the uneven ground that was full of stones was flattened in an instant. The ground of the valley shook under this step. Gravel rolled down the mountain and smashed into the ground. Golden cloud patterns flashed on the mountain walls. This was the protective energy left behind by the Xia shaman. However, it could stop the sound of the bell earlier, but now, it could not completely suppress the roar. Xiao Xian felt the pressure around him increase. Moreover, the bone ornament's power was restless, as if they wanted to rush out and fight against the surrounding pressure. However, most of the bone ornament's power was still controlled by Xiao Xian. The bone ornament's power was not great, but if this continued, Xiao Xian would be deprived of the power to use the bone ornaments. Fortunately, Xiao Xian had already proven his theory. He had achieved his goals, so there was no need to continue. Xiao Xian slowly retracted the power of inheritance. Since the bone ornaments were no longer controlled by the power of inheritance, its power was retracted. The flame man turned into a ball of flame and disappeared into the bone ornaments. The cloud patterns on the mountain walls disappeared with the flame and slowly disappeared into the mountain walls. Everything returned to normal. On the other side, Heng, who had entered Gongjia Mountain, was so excited that tears filled his eyes as he read the records left behind by his ancestors. His eyes were filled with admiration. Just then, he seemed to have heard the sound of a bronze bell. The soundproofing on Gongjia Mountain was good, so Heng wasn't sure if the sound he heard was real. When he wanted to listen again, he couldn't hear it anymore. Heng thought it was either his imagination or Xiao Xian did it. However, didn't the seniors in the tribe say that outsiders could not ring the bell? Or did he misunderstand? Shaking his head, Heng continued to read the records left behind by his ancestors. As he read, he felt the ground shake again. Could it be that Xiao Xian had forced his way into the mountain? When he thought about how Xiao Xian had stepped through the bronze door, Heng shuddered. This was the first time someone had scared him like this. Chapter 4:17. After Xiao Xian retracted his power of inheritance, he sat on the ground, panting heavily. Xiao Xian's power of inheritance was almost depleted after activating the bone ornament's power. He was exhausted and did not even have the energy to stand up. It was as if the stomp had used up all of Xiao Xian's energy. Fortunately, there were no other dangerous creatures or threats here. As long as Xiao Xian did not attack, the valley was still very safe. The Xia shamans had set up a barrier here as a form of protection. However, even without this, Gongjia Mountain was within Xia Valley. The valley was deathly silent, not even a mouse could be found, much less other beasts. After sitting on the ground and panting for a while, Xiao Xian moved his stiff muscles and stood up slowly. He walked to the side to pick some fruit. He had used up too much energy, so he had to eat some wild fruit to quench his thirst. Needless to say, this fruit didn't look like much, but it was crispy and juicy. After eating it, he felt a cool breeze wash away the burning pain in his body. Because of the forceful expansion of his meridians just now, the injury was also quickly healing. There was a field of grain growing nearby. Xiao Xian did not know what kind of grain it was, but Gongjia Heng had said that everything here was edible. It was something the Xia people used to grow. After the Xia tribe split up and the Xia people left, these grains sprouted freely here, growing generation after generation. Every time the Xia people came, they would clean this place up. Xiao Xian ate a few fruits in a row. His hunger subsided and his power of inheritance was recovering. However, it was very slow. He did not know how long it would take for him to recover to his original state. This time, he had indeed exceeded his limit, but Xiao Xian had a feeling that after this, the amount of totemic power and power of inheritance he could store in his body would increase. Whether that was true or not, he would know when he fully recovered. If that was true, it was a good thing. Xiao Xian planned to train more with the bone ornament in the future. If used well, it would be of great help to Yanjiao. There were all kinds of vines crawling all over the mountain walls. Some of them still had fruits hanging on them. Some of them were still in their flowering stage, while others had probably already borne fruit or had yet to reach their flowering and fruiting season. Xiao Xian walked to a corner and plucked a fruit hanging from a vine. It was rare for him to come here, so he wanted to try Gongjia Valley's specialties. When he plucked the fruit moved the leaves on the vine. Xiao Xian paused and moved his hand away from the fruit on the vine. He pushed aside the leaves to reveal the mountain wall. There were some words on the mountain wall, but the handwriting was not all the same. The size of the words were also different. These were not cloud patterns, so Xiao Xian could understand them. As he read, Xiao Xian realized that these were answers to his previous questions. That was why Xiao Xian followed the handwriting and found the first line. The person who carved the words was probably not a Xia person. He had found this place but realized he could not enter Gongjia Mountain. He had almost killed himself. After all, the Xia shaman's restrictions were not to be trifled with. Outsiders could not enter. After much hesitation, the person carved the question he did not understand on the mountain wall. The bronze he made always had problems. He felt that something must have gone wrong when he smelted the ores. It had been a long time since he carved these words. Perhaps at that time, blacksmithing was not as advanced as it was now. Very few people had mastered the technique. This person was obsessed with blacksmithing but had no talent. He did not understand the technique and could not find any other Xia people to help him. He did not know where he heard about Gongjia Mountain and came here. He even succeeded in reaching this place. After carving his question, the person left. He did not see his handwriting after that. After that person had carved his question, finally, one day, a Xia person came and saw the words on the mountain. He was in a good mood and carved his answer on the mountain wall. The general meaning was, first, control the heat. Second, pay attention to the gas that appears when the ores are smelted. There was a sense of elegance in the handwriting. Seeing the words was like seeing the person. Although these words were carved, the strokes were very natural. It did not feel like it was broken. It was a whole and there was a faint aura brewing. It was clear that the person who carved these words was very skilled. After the first person answered, another Xia person came here after some time. When he saw the question and answer on the mountain wall, he added on to the first person's answer. He explained the first person's suggestion of controlling the heat and observing the gas when the ores were smelted. During smelting, different colored gases would appear when the ores were melted. First, there would be black gas. As the temperature of the furnace rose, yellow and white gas would appear. This was not enough. When the furnace temperature rose, green flames would appear. When the green and white gas appeared, when the ores were completely melted, only green gas would be left. That was when the ores were ready to be smelted. The second person's words were very proper. Every word was written seriously, not as elegant as the first person's. After that, there was a third person. Not only did he supplement the previous two answers, but he also mentioned the best ratio for casting and forging different tools. After all, bronzeware was not entirely made of copper. There were other metals as well. Different tools had different amounts of different metals. Xiao Xian took out a piece of animal skin and wrote down all these. After that, there was a fourth person. First, he admitted what the first few people had said. Then, he gave some personal opinions. For example, when smelting, adding a type of beast's blood would make the forged copper stronger. It could even cut through stone easily. Xiao Xian continued copying. He shrunk the words on the mountain wall and copied them onto the animal skin, including the style of the person who wrote them. Xiao Xian couldn't understand the two words, so he couldn't guess what kind of beast he was talking about. However, Xiao Xian still wrote it down. He copied it down first, and then he could ask people later. Xiao Xian didn't know what kind of beast he was talking about. Xiao Xian didn't understand it, and couldn't guess what kind of beast he was talking about. After that, someone finally refuted the first person's words. Probably out of respect for their ancestors, they did not directly curse or say things like nonsense. However, they left a sentence, "How can metal be mixed with other things?" This person must have been very emotional when he carved the words. Every word was carved deeply and forcefully, as if he wanted to chisel it down with all his strength. He refuted the former's suggestion of adding beast's blood to the smelting process. He felt that it was a crooked method. After that, there were also people who wrote on whether to add beast's blood to the smelting process, whether to mix in other things, or whether to use a crooked method to make weapons and other things. They wrote down their own opinions. Some people even said that they had used human blood before. Some people agreed, while others disagreed. The last person wrote, "What the ancestors and seniors said is very reasonable. Let me go back and verify it." After that, there was no more. The last person who left a message did not come back. Not only the last person, but the people who came before did not come back. Otherwise, they would have continued their discussion. Although they respected their ancestors, they were not like the other tribes. They did not think that their ancestors were all right. Their forging skills were improving and innovating. While they worshipped and thanked their ancestors, they also believed in the new things they had mastered. Xiao Xian did not know whether the last person had verified it successfully or not. He also did not know whether other things could be added during the smelting process. He wrote down the discussion on the wall that spanned thousands of years without missing a word. When the Xia people were outside, they were very protective of their skills. They would not let outsiders learn their skills. However, here, they seemed to have abandoned the barriers of blood and purely discussed it with the attitude of discussing skills. Perhaps they also had the intention of letting the future generations admire them. At the end, they even left their names. Unfortunately, they only had one chance to leave a message. After they left, no one came back. After he finished writing, his arm was still sore. Xiao Xian kept the animal skin scroll and moved his arm. He ate a few more fruits and found a suitable place to rest. It was almost dark now. He had used up a lot of energy today, so Xiao Xian needed a good rest to recover his depleted energy as soon as possible. It was a little cold in the valley at night, but Xiao Xian did not mind. He plucked a melon as a pillow and fell asleep on the grass. In Gongjia Mountain, Heng studied the things left behind by the ancestors on the wall for an entire night. During the day, Yang Guang shone in through a transparent crystal so he could read the words on the wall and the things left behind by the Xia ancestors. At night, he took out the glowing crystal Xiao Xian had given him and continued reading. When he snapped back to reality, his eyes were red, but he was full of energy. He wanted nothing more than to continue reading. Inside Gongjia Mountain, other than the things left behind by the earliest Xia ancestors, every Xia who came would present their best skills to the next generation so that they could learn their best skills and be proud of them. The Xia people's skills were praised by the world. The best skills left behind by the Xia people were priceless treasures that countless Xia people yearned for their entire lives. Treasures. They were all treasures. Now, all these treasures were right in front of him. How could Heng remain calm? However, he was a little hungry. Plus, Xiao Xian was outside the mountain, someone he was wary of. He had to go out and check on him or he wouldn't feel at ease. Yesterday, when he sensed the commotion, he wanted to go out and take a look. However, he was too engrossed in reading and the commotion outside did not continue. That was why he did not leave the mountain. There was a pool on Gongjia Mountain that was formed by underground spring water. It was called the Cauldron Pool because it protruded from the ground and looked like a cauldron. The stream that flowed in the valley outside the mountain came from the Cauldron Pool. The water in the Ding Pool was clear and did not dry all year round. There were even palm-sized fish swimming in it. Heng used a fishing tool to catch a few fish and got up to leave. Chapter 418. When he reached the main hall, Heng looked around carefully but did not see Xiao Xian. He looked closer and found that the hall was still the same as before. The 18 bronze statues were still standing there, untouched. Nothing had changed. Everything in the hall was the same, the hidden traps and mechanisms were not triggered. Xiao Xian really had not stepped in. Heng heaved a sigh of relief, but at the same time, he had mixed feelings. If it had been someone else with bad intentions, Heng would have done everything he could to use the power of the mountain to kill them. However, although Xiao Xian was curious about the Xia's skills, he was not greedy. If it had been someone else, they might have continued to barge in while Heng was gone. They might have even threatened Heng to hand over the things in Gongjia Mountain. However, Xiao Xian did not do that. Besides, Xiao Xian had helped him before. Without Xiao Xian, Heng knew that he might not have been able to reach this place even after 20 years. Heng would remember this favor. However, Xiao Xian was too strange. Heng stroked his bushy beard. The image of Xiao Xian stepping into the hall was still fresh in his mind. Seriously. He was so scared that his beard almost fell off. However, as long as Xiao Xian did not force his way into the mountain, Heng was more than willing to be friends with him. He carried the fish out of the mountain and stood at the door. He scanned his surroundings and saw the round pit with a diameter of over 10 meters. It was very shallow, only about the depth of a palm. However, the inside of the pit was very flat, as if someone had flattened it with a knife. This round pit did not exist before. Heng was sure of that. If it had been here before, he would have remembered it. When he thought about the tremor he felt in the mountain, he could not remain calm. What had happened when he was in the mountain? When Heng found Xiao Xian was sleeping on a white melon. Xiao Xian woke up when he sensed someone approaching. However, he didn't attack because the footsteps sounded familiar. "You're out." Xiao Xian yawned. "Did you sleep well here? Did you dream of something good?" Heng teased when he saw Xiao Xian sleeping soundly. "I dreamed of your ancestors," Xiao Xian answered. Ugh. Heng did not take it seriously. He did not believe Xiao Xian at all. Xiao Xian didn't say much. He got up and cut the melon that was used as a pillow. He divided half of it to Jia Heng. "This melon is pretty good. Can I get some seeds to plant?" Xiao Xian asked. "You won't be able to plant them even if you take them away. They can only grow here. They won't grow anywhere else. I heard many people tried to take them out but they couldn't even germinate," said Heng. "Then I can only eat them here." Xiao Xian was a little disappointed. He looked at the fish in Heng's hand and asked, "Where did you get these?" "There's a pond in the mountain." Heng had read his ancestors' records and drew it. He didn't do it on purpose because his ancestors' drawing skills were limited. It was just a drawing. However, later on, our ancestors proved that there was a type of stone-eating insect. Its blood was many times more potent than the green-faced fanged beast. However, it was not easy to find. Regular insects would not work. They had to be ferocious beasts. Stone insects? Xiao Xian was more familiar with these creatures. "I think so. Different places have different names for them." Heng looked at the discussion on the wall. They had already revealed many secret techniques. They even wrote down when to add beast blood. Heng wanted to punch the wall. Was it really a good idea to reveal these things so easily? But since it was left behind by his ancestors, he could not just destroy it. He was conflicted. But on second thought, this was why his ancestors were so confident. They were not afraid. Even if other people mastered this method, the weapons they made would not be as good as their masterpieces. At this thought, Heng felt ashamed. As expected, he still needed to learn from his ancestors, be it in terms of mentality or skills. After adjusting his mentality, he looked at the words on the wall again. He was much calmer now. He even copied the person in front of him and carved his name at the end. From the discussion, Xiao Xian learned many things about forging. With the knowledge he already had, Xiao Xian believed that as long as he had ore, he could also make bronze weapons. But he didn't know how good the quality would be. Where did the core seed come from? Asked Xiao Xian. Heng did not know this before, but yesterday he read about it in the records left behind by his ancestors. It was not a secret. When Xiao Xian asked, Heng said, the core seed came from outer space. Outer space? Xiao Xian was shocked. Yeah. 2,000 years ago, the core seed arrived and was scattered everywhere. In the beginning, many people worshipped it as a sacred object, but later, more and more people died in the tribes with the core seed. Everyone saw the core seed as a magical creature, a symbol of death. They threw it far away. But Gongjia Heng's eyes shone with pride. The core seed has descended around the Xia tribe too. However, unlike the other tribes, we've discovered the core seed's secret. It's not a magical creature, it's a treasure that can change the world. The rise of the Xia tribe originated from the core seed. They were the first to discover how to use the core seed and made bronze weapons. The other tribes traded for bronze weapons from the Xia tribe. At the same time, the 6 major tribes were also collecting the core seed and learning how to use it. Since then, war broke out across the mainland. In the records of the Xia tribe, it was called the War of the Core Seed. In the history of the mainland, there were 2 transitions. The first was the change of the fire seed. After that, there were no more fire seeds in the fire pit. The second transition was the core seed. After that, the 6 major tribes became the real 6 major tribes. They controlled most of the core seeds and the smaller tribes could only eat the leftovers. Later on, the Ji tribe took in the other 5 tribes and called them Hong. The city was gradually formed. The 6 major tribes had many slaves, so they were called slave masters. The leader of the Ji tribe was called the king. However, to the Xia tribe, none of that had anything to do with them. They were immersed in forging and were fascinated by it. The 6 major tribes did not cause any trouble for the Xia tribe. Instead, they often invited the Xia tribe to forge their weapons for them. Under the temptation of benefits, many Xia tribesmen left. Later on, due to the changes in the landscape and the core seed, the Xia River dried up and turned into Xia Valley. Under the influence of the core seed, Xia Valley became a dead valley, and due to its natural topography, it became a maze. The Xia ancestors had no choice but to leave for the tribe. Before they left, they built Gongjia Mountain and drew cloud patterns that hid many secrets so that their descendants would never forget this place. Generation after generation, every Xia tribesman who came here would present their proudest achievements. This was their land of faith. Slowly, this place became a land of treasures because Gongjia Mountain contained the most precious treasures of the Xia tribesmen from different eras. They were the ones who were unwilling to share their skills with others. As the first Xia people to make bronze weapons, they did not belong to one of the 6 major tribes. In terms of scale and status on the mainland, the Xia tribe was still a far cry from the 6 major cities. Plus, the Xia tribesmen were increasingly scattered. It was difficult for them to gather again. Xiao Xian sighed inwardly. This was the difference between technology and politics. After telling Xiao Xian all this, Heng felt ashamed. He didn't have any secret techniques to offer Xiao Xian. All he could do was learn and craft an item himself as a tribute. That's why I have to stay here for a while. Xiao Xian, what do you plan to do? Asked Heng. I'll leave in a few days, said Xiao Xian. Heng nodded. I'll go to the Yanjiao tribe to look for you after I'm done. Right, how did you make that pit? I stepped on it. Heng was speechless. Hurry up and leave. This place can't take your steps. Heng was still thinking about the things in Gongjia Mountain, so after eating outside, he entered the mountain again. Not long after he entered the mountain, Xiao Xian walked towards a certain spot in the valley. He was not lying when he said he had dreamed of the Xia ancestors. Chapter 419. When Xiao Xian slept last night, he dreamed of many people. He couldn't see their faces clearly, but Xiao Xian knew that he didn't know any of them. He saw someone carving words on the mountain wall. At the mountain wall that he had seen before, a few people went there one after another. First, there was a person who looked extremely disheveled as he carved the first line of words on the mountain wall. After that, people appeared one after another. Some stopped to look and then left, while others picked up a knife to carve the words. Some looked steady, while others looked bold. Other than that, there were other places on the mountain wall where people were carving words. Of all the places where words were carved, there were two that had the most people going there. One of them was the place where he had seen a discussion about whether to add beast blood to the forging process. The other place was, Xiao Xian came to another mountain wall according to the dream he had last night. There were many plants around here, and the vines were densely packed. They covered almost the entire mountain wall close to the ground, and the mountain wall was tightly covered. Xiao Xian carefully peeled off the vines that clung to the mountain wall and saw the words on the mountain wall. However, what was different from the carvings on the mountain wall was that the first words here were written with paint. It was unknown what kind of paint the writer used, but the paint actually seeped into the stone wall, allowing the words to be clearly preserved for a long time. The words on the wall were sharp. From the words, one could see how arrogant the writer was at the time. He looked at the words again. I have been observing the life and death of plants, trees, water, and stones. I have observed the emptiness of heaven and earth. Today, I have learned about the changes of the core seed metal and stone. I have come to ask for advice. Translated into one sentence, I'm here to make a mess of this place. On the left side of the sentence, there were a few concentric rings. The distance between each ring and the center was different. Some were close, some were far, and the distance between the rings was different. On each of the concentric rings, there were lines and all kinds of markings. It looked very complicated, but the markings on the rings made Xiao Xian very happy. Xiao Xian didn't understand the symbols on it, but he could guess from the text that one of them was copper, the other was tin, and the others were definitely other metals. Seeing this, Xiao Xian's heartbeat quickened. This was the first time he was so close to the core secret of the core seed. What Gongjia Heng was talking about was historical. This was the dissected truth. It turned out that the core seed could make the stone change like this. It turned out that the people who worked around the core seed used this rule to harvest ores. According to this tribesman, if you gave him a piece of ore, he would know which part of the core seed circle it came from. He could even tell which type of metal was most suitable for making. It was also signed Chu. Needless to say, this tribesman had given Xiao Xian a deep understanding of the changes the core seed could bring to the stone, and what it would become in the end. Which type of metal was distributed in which circle, which proportion of metal was most suitable for making metal, and so on were all listed. There was even a formula. However, the formula was derived from the ring diagram, so Xiao Xian couldn't understand it yet. He had to admit that the tribesmen were too talented. At first, Xiao Xian thought the tribesmen were only famous for their divination skills. He didn't expect their brains to be so advanced. After Chu, a Xia person replied. Compared to the former's complicated words and pictures, this Xia person only replied with two simple words, bullshit. The words were directly engraved. They were large and each word was engraved with great force. It was obvious that the person who engraved the words was in a rather bad mood. No one would be in a good mood if someone came knocking on their door. Plus, they couldn't understand these things at all. After that, another tribesman came and used similar paint. He wrote after the Xia person's reply, I am deeply moved by the senior's words. The senior this tribesman referred to was naturally Chu. He even wrote down his own thoughts. It was an upgraded version of the ring diagram. The concentric rings were denser and each ring had a different thickness. There were also more lines on the diagram, allowing for more precise calculations. After the diagram, there were words, clearly directed at Chu, this is my conclusion. As for the Xia tribesman, I am ashamed to speak with you because you are ignorant. His handwriting wasn't as flamboyant, it was reserved. The way he used the brush was gentle, but the things he wrote did not lose to his senior choose. As for this tribesman's upgraded formula diagram, the Xia tribesman's reply was as simple as his senior's: it's all bullshit. They couldn't understand Ichu's diagram, let alone this upgraded one. However, this didn't stop them from mocking the tribesman. After that, there were arguments between the tribesman and the Xia tribesman. From the ratio of metal to the composition of ores and the best mining time, there were arguments. However, one leaned towards theory while the other leaned towards practical experience. What the Xia people believed in was to practice more and practice more. The Xia tribesmen were naturally talented in the art of forging. This was something other tribesmen could not compare to. Talent and hard work combined to create amazing products. The tribesmen, on the other hand, were intelligent and proficient in mathematics. They could calculate the ratio of copper to tin to 10 decimal places for a single piece of bronze. One focused on practical experience while the other leaned towards mathematical theory. One encouraged hard work while the other encouraged hard work. The Xia people said, the tribesmen love to think they can change the world. The tribesmen retorted, this is called discipline, this is strength. The Xia people said, everyone, don't think too much. You'll go crazy if you think too much. Use your hands more, you're all as weak as chickens. Can you even lift a hammer? The tribesmen sneered, we're so smart, so much better than you idiots who only use your hammers. We only need to use our brains and we can crush you 1,000 times over. No matter what, we're one of the 6 great tribes. We're much better than the Xia tribesmen who are in a state of disunity. The Xia people said, we're willing to devote our lives to the art of metal. We can excavate the core seed's greatest value and change the world. What can you do? You took the core seed just for a few words? What a waste. Wastrels. No wonder the G tribe took you in. Go and observe the life and death of your plants. Xiao Xian watched their argument and laughed so hard his mouth almost split. He took out his animal skin scroll and copied it down. There was a lot of useful information inside. Not only were there complicated diagrams drawn by the tribesmen, there were also things they revealed during their argument. For example, many of the tribesmen were physically weak. They had the core seed but they did not use it for casting. They mainly used it for calculations. There was also some history about the Xia people that Gongjia Heng did not mention. Of course, techniques were developed during the argument. Both sides also mentioned a lot of casting and forging. They were all very useful techniques. Xiao Xian copied everything down without missing a word. Here, Xiao Xian witnessed a debate that spanned 1,000 years on a mountain wall. What he saw on the other mountain wall could be considered a discussion. Although the people who carved the words were emotional, they were mostly Xia people. The words they carved were relatively mild. On this side, if there was a real person here, it would definitely be an intense war of words. Xiao Xian already knew about the core seed's origins. Xiao Xian also knew about its uses. He even knew about the distribution of metals and some casting techniques. All of this was recorded on the animal skin scroll. He just remembered what he saw in the desert years ago. Those people chose stones and placed them around the core seed. Different stones had different effects on the core seed. Xiao Xian would have to find the answer himself. Xiao Xian found a few other mountain walls. However, the carvings here were much more casual. Most of them were not Xia people, so they were not very useful. Most of them were written to express their depression. After all, it was not easy for them to come here, but they could not enter Gongjia Mountain. They wanted to destroy this place but could not break through the restrictions. All in all, Xiao Xian was satisfied with his harvest. In the following days, while Xiao Xian recovered his power of inheritance in the valley, he also dug up anything useful and studied the complicated diagrams left behind by the people. Whether it was the Yi people or the Xia people's techniques, they were all very useful. Xiao Xian could combine them and combine theory with practice. It would be much easier for him to make metal weapons in the future. Gong Jiaheng came out a few times, but each time he came out in a hurry. He picked some food and went back in. He looked like he was in a trance and did not care about the outside world. Xiao Xian even noticed that when he was picking fruit, he suddenly swung his arm and smashed the fruit into paste. He was so focused that he ignored everything around him. After another 10 days, Xiao Xian felt that his power of inheritance had mostly recovered. He planned to try activating the bone ornament's power again. In order not to create more pits, Xiao Xian planned to try again at the original pit. This time, with his previous experience, Xiao Xian was much more familiar with it. Using the pressure of the Xia shaman's restrictions, he activated his power of inheritance and the flame man finally appeared again. Xiao Xian tried walking but still could not walk far. He only took a small step. Then, the pit that was originally 10 meters wide and as deep as a palm became 20 meters wide and half a meter deep. Before he left, Xiao Xian carved a circle of words along the wall of the pit. He thanked the seniors who came to Gongjia Valley for benefiting him so much. At the end, he signed it, Yanjiao Xiao Xian. You're tuning into the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.